Three, two, one. We are recording. This is a fun time. Welcome, welcome, everybody. As you know, I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, and we're tonight joined by the amazing Penny Bradley, who is the Nacht Waffen navigator, interstellar navigator with the most incredible story I have ever heard in my life. And so we're going to introduce Penny. And also with us is Jake from Astral Urmah. Jake is doing what you might call astral battles in support of others, including Marie and Swaru from the Tegetan Pleiadians, Swaru official. You'll hear a little more about that. The point is that Jake is doing experiments to see if the brainwave harmonic training actually helps facilitate when your brainwave harmonics get implosive centripetal. Does that make you more powerful in the astral? And that brings us back to Penny, because Penny has this amazing lifetime of horrible or extremely traumatic experiences where they train these SSP navigators, and she's probably the ultimate navigator. And so at the end of Penny's story, what we're wondering is if we can gain a little more self-empowering with biofeedback and training and bliss training with a little bit less pain, question mark. But that's at the end. Right now, let's introduce Penny. So the point about Penny is that we can't review her story in depth here now because we would take all night. And we really recommend that you look at Penny's Odyssey channel for the many videos, which Valerie sitting next to me caused me to watch many of them. She's very dedicated. And so, for example, Penny's
I
film.
feel sorry for you. There are probably 100 hours of
Yeah,
video.
but Penny's story about the history of the Anunnaki is knock your socks off. Interesting, completely different point of view. I just found that very interesting. And also Penny's story includes that she believes, a fragment of the soul incarnation of Ninhursag, which is who Enki and Enlil were fighting over through most of history. And that story gets so colorful with Penny's point of view. Penny's point of view about Draco versus Cathar is radical, different. The Cathar are the gods of the Draco, and not just the royalty of the Draco. And it goes on. And Penny has a viewpoint about Alex Collier's Andromedan versus the Mitra. Anyway, Penny's story is amazing. So why don't we start there, Penny? Maybe for the first 5 or 10 minutes, let's tell us maybe the high points of your story you would like us to hear, and then we do colorful dialogue, if that's okay with you, Penny.
Okay. Before I was born, I was subjected to CRISPR tech. I do not believe that was part of my life plan. I used to not believe that I had a life plan. I thought this was just free will. And over time, I realized I kept being funneled into decisions I didn't want. In fact, it would be the exact opposite of what I would what I had chosen is where I would end up. And so I was basically having an emotional temper tantrum. And my guide at the time took me back in time, astral, watched my most recent past life self, looking through this book that's the size of a modern physics textbook. You know, those big, thick things. And he's getting to the last of it because I was a man last life. And he says, I will be insane by the end, but it's necessary, so it has to be done. And then he signs it, and I was brought back to the here and now time. And I'm like, damn, I wish I could kick his ass. And so, yeah, it's been a real humdinger of an incarnation.
But your story, Penny, was that they were inserting Draco DNA in you to help make you the powerful navigator. Did I catch that right?
Okay, they looked at family lines, people who were descended from Jesus. This is who they were looking for because they were looking for what you would call Anunnaki DNA. I call it Jahami. That's the particular race out of the 22 that the ancients called Anunnaki.
And we think this is related to the Grail story, of course, obviously. So very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there were reasons why that all of the paintings of the Annunciation show a spaceship above.
For sure.
Okay. This is, if you pay attention to the art, you pay attention to the culture, you pay attention to um, even the dogma. How does a woman have a child without having sex?
Yeah. And
Implantation. Okay. They called it different things then, but if you properly translate it into today's terminology, she was implanted.
well,
Now,
even Michael Sarian says the same thing. It means Anunnaki implanted. But this is a
yeah,
whole other layer to Genesis of the Grail Kings, which is the psychokinesis that results. So please go on. Yes.
yes, because Jesus had, let's call him by his real name, Yahushua ben Yosef. And later at the Sanhedrin trial, he was declared to be Yahushua ben Pantera. And Pantera was the nickname for Tiberius Caesar because his mother was not some Jewish peasant off in Nazareth. She was the great granddaughter of Herod the Great. So this was a royal bloodline that was mixed between the Arabs next door and the Jews.
The Essene royalty is what's usually described, but I see, and there's a
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but she was decent. She wasn't decent. Okay, she didn't have any of the genealogies that are put forth in the New Testament. All of those are genealogies of Joseph, her husband, who today we call Joseph of Arimathea. Same
Yes.
man. She was the what did they call it? When you had a subject king, they took one of his family members to go live in the court of the overlords.
Oh, I see.
Hostage, that's the proper term. So
Yeah.
she was the hostage. So she was taken from Jerusalem to Rome. And when they sent her back, she was pregnant. So was this Tiberius Caesar's child, or was this implanted by the Anunnaki, or what? And there's no, because Tiberius was a known rapist, she may not have even had a choice in the matter. So the story has a lot of alternates.
Yeah, I mean, one alternate that's very common from our perspective is that the righteous priest ancestor of the Essenes was, in fact, Akhenaten Moses, and therefore there was royal Egyptian blood on the side of Jesus. That's the other myth
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
The other side of the story is somewhere along the line. One of King David's wives
Yeah.
was Egyptian from the line of Cain.
Yeah, which it says the royal Egyptians is the bloodline of Cain, which is exactly Genesis of the Grail Kings by Gardner. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I've read Gardner. That when I did my family tree in 2005 on Ancestry, I worked on it a while, and when I got to where I had more than 2 lines that came from Robert the Bruce,
Oh.
I was contacted by someone who is a 7th cousin,
Oh.
and I have been being fed information about the family ever since. So he linked up with me about 2010, and he would give me these book lists. Well, I want you to read this, and this. Anyway, the last one he said, you need to learn Latin to proceed because the next books you need to be able to read Latin well enough to read Cicero.
And
And I'm having a really hard time. My brain is not as plastic as it was in my 20s.
But the physics here that, our history of ET is called fusion in the blood, that this ancestry is looking for where the DNA implodes, literally the Grail animation. And that implosion in the DNA is genetically based in part. And that's what the Grail, the Jesus blood, and that implosion in the blood makes psychokinetic. So
now David Icke is wrong. The royals are not Draco. The royals are Shahami.
Anunnaki.
Anunnaki.
Yes.
And all of their actual abilities come from either Anunnaki DNA or black magic. Now, I don't practice black magic. I also don't shapeshift. Neither does my cousin who's been teaching me. So I really don't. And my great-grandfather was a Windsor bastard, exiled to the United States. No one in my family shapeshifts. So I'm pretty sure that the ones at Buckingham Palace don't either.
Yeah.
They've just got people convinced they do.
But the point is that the Anunnaki apparently, what we say is, bred the royal families of Europe for 1,000 years like they were show dog for some particular reason, which was to make
Oh
him
no, it wasn't 1,000 years.
Hundreds of years.
What they did was they tried 25 different times to create a human Lulu work slave that was smart enough to do the work, strong enough to do the work, and stupid enough to stop rebelling. And they settled on us.
Yeah.
And then they made an in-between.
Yeah.
Enki literally inbred with Eve to create Cain's line.
Yeah, which is the king, and that's Lawrence Gardner. Yes.
And when these people explain it to you, they put it in clear terms. Cain was half human, half Anunnaki, and he was married to Lilith, who was full Anunnaki, and their children had Anunnaki abilities but human limitations, and they were set to be the overseers.
Yeah, they were the babysitters, basically. That's why they call them king.
Baby. And that's why they're mad about it.
Yeah.
Is because they're tired of babysitting everybody else.
Yeah.
And
the royal line. Oops.
So they were kind of disobedient, and they would have sex with anybody.
Yeah.
And so their bloodline would water down. And so every 1,000 years or so, there would be an influx of new Anunnaki blood into this family line. Now, these guys are called blood elves. And my cousin Nick DeVere, whose real name, by the way, was Thomas Weir of Blackwood. Yeah. Yes, I'm fifth cousins to dear Nicky. He wrote a book, The Dragon Legacy. And he found boxes and boxes and boxes of genealogical materials in his attic because he was living in Blackwood. And so he published them. And they literally go back to Cain. So if you buy his books, you match up with one, eventually match up with one of the people he writes about, you can prove you are of this bloodline. Now, the tribe of these people that was left in charge, there were 12 tribes of elves. That's what they were called before they split into Scythians and Mongolians. The Mongolians intermarried with the Chinese, the Scythians intermarried with the Europeans.
Yeah.
Some in between intermarried between them. But there were basically 12 tribes.
Perfect.
Sound familiar?
So familiar. But Penny, not to back up just a second.
Only one of them was given the kingship, the Blood Elves. And they're called that because they have a tendency to pernicious anemia.
Ooh, which fits the English story as well. But just back up, just was that De Vere bloodline related to this famous Shakespeare story as well? The De Veres?
Yes,
Aha. Boy,
those
my friend
DeVeres.
Teresa is going to love this. Anyway.
They're also descended from Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
Right. But so this is so deep and wonderful. But do we want to get back to why this made you powerful and valuable to the
Well,
Germans and the
it
Draco?
it was it was this family line
Mhm.
is who these agencies are targeting
Yeah, like the Grail.
because they want that DNA.
That
Um,
psychokinesis.
yes. Do you know that pure blood Shahami can do a thing they call LERM? It is literally producing physical objects out of the ambient energy in the air.
Wow. It's sort of like when Sai Baba makes vibhuti. It's gold powder related. Sai Baba's, which,
They can do all sorts of things, but technologically, they're only about 1,000 years ahead of us.
Mhm.
They were not some great, wonderful, powerful beings, but they wanted us to think they were. They still use spaceships. They still use slavery. They still are a very warring people. And when they have a king die, the heirs will literally nuke each other.
Yeah, that's Draco. That's
No, that's Anunnaki.
that's yeah, that's
That's not the Draco.
oh,
The
it's
Draco are smarter than that. They have a very clear line of succession. They have a queen. They have a queen, and when she gets old, one of her daughters is assigned to take over, and she becomes the queen mother, and you have both of them operating together as a
and
unit.
no nukes required. But
No nukes required. They have a much better system.
yeah, so
And in their case, they have a matriarchy because the females are venomous,
yeah,
and that was the trump card in their war between the genders.
yeah, that was the trick. And I learned that actually from the Hopi. They said the origin of the word, the S in the spit, was because the female's spit was venomous and poisonous, could kill you. That's what made the
Mhm.
females. So, but just since so many of our friends are very much stuck in this, Enki and Thoth are the heroes here, and you have such a different point of view, do you want to do that now or?
My point of view is from interacting with them in the here and now,
Yeah,
starting in about 2014 until I guess the last time Thoth bothered me was about 2 years ago. So this was a very real situation. Um, the Queen Mother, well, first Tiamat reached out to me and
that's the
assigned.
Draco. That's Tiamat is the Draco queen.
Tiamat is a Siakar.
Theokar, white queen, white queen. That
No, she is ivory colored,
uh-huh.
but she is a Siakar. In youth, they are like Western dragons.
Mhm.
In middle age, they're like Eastern dragons. And in old age, they're flying snakes.
Mhm.
But the Bible calls them seraphim.
Yeah, Seraphim, the winged ones, right? And is that the one that uh what Johann Fritz Will Nutter was telling me he met the White Queen?
The White Queen is Draco.
Oh, I see. And you're referring to
I'm
this
referring to a completely different species.
Siakar Queen, and that's the point. Most people have that, like Elena says, the Siakar are just the one queen.
They don't really have a queen.
Huh.
There's only 104 of them left
Of the
and,
Siakar.
of the Siakar, and they're not in physical anymore. They're in 12D.
Mhm.
And anybody that says a Siakar is a Draco is woefully ignorant.
Mhm. And like Elena is saying, the Siakar are surrounded.
There is one Siakar that the Draco think they have her trapped in a temple, but she buzzes in and out. She goes where she wants, does what she wants.
Mm.
She reappears because it makes them happy.
Mm. But the Siakar queen liked you, right?
Yeah, she chose me
She adopted you because you were
because
Ninner.
I am a Siakar.
And does that relate to your heritage with Ninhursag, who Enki and Enlil all had to fight over?
Um, Siakar incarnate as other beings to experience
Mhm.
reality, sensation. 12D doesn't have physical sensation.
Mhm.
So they're basically an ascended race, and they come back to 3D because it's the only place that has physical sensation. It's also the only place where new things are developed. So it's a very important place because it's the overlap between the Sephira and the Klipthoth.
Mhm.
Those are technical terms. In reality, what common people can understand, it's the overlap between heaven and hell.
Mhm.
And because it's the overlap, it's a 50-50 mix. If either side wins, the whole tree falls apart.
Mhm.
But because it's the overlap, it becomes the Vesica Pisces where new things are grown.
Mhm. That's why they all fight over us. And they were fighting over you.
God, they were fighting over me. The Anana, the Jahami have this really weird cultural practice where the sons of the king,
Yeah, Anu.
if there is a daughter of the king, and she gives one of the sons a male child, not a female, just a male, then that son becomes the new king.
Mhm.
And so they were fighting over her because they both wanted a son from her, and she kept giving both of them daughters.
So Enki and Enlil both needed you, but, as it were.
But um, Daddy Anu got mad and said, "You're not going to ever get married." And that should have put the kibosh on that, but it didn't. And so there were two wars between the brothers. In the first war, Ninhursag was killed in a nuke
Mhm.
in the Sinai. In the second war, Thoth and Enlil gutted Mahat. Okay, what had happened in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth talks about that he raised this beautiful woman from the dead. That was Ninhursag. And when he raised her, he called her Mahat and married her. And they had 4 sets of twins, a male and female aspect of each of the netters. And they were actual, real beings. A lot of people now want to say they were principles, but they weren't. They were real Anunnaki beings born on Earth. And they were together they ruled Egypt for thousands of years, the pair of them. Thoth took care of the temples and the schools and the music and the arts and the religion. Mahat took care of the courts and the laws. And her abilities were so important that in later years, the job of the pharaoh was to preserve Mahat. In other words, keep the order.
Mhm.
So that was the sole duty of the pharaoh was to preserve Mahat.
Mhm. Well,
But
and the name
but
of the royal
during
line.
that
Go ahead, sorry.
but during that time frame, if you went to court and you were to testify, they would put stamp of this green stuff on your tongue, and it was poisonous. And if you told the truth, Mahat would spare you, and if you lied, you would die.
Mhm.
So
And
this was not a court system like anything we know now, but
but
it was effective.
so many of our friends now are seeing Thoth and Enki, particularly Thoth Ningishita, as this absolute hero. And you have a different, for example, the Templars and our friend Dolly, everybody sees Thoth as this, saint of history.
Yeah, I know. Dolly is quite impressed with them. I
Yeah,
love Dolly.
Dolly.
Dolly and I have been friends since before either of us were public. And she's a wonderful person, but she is so impressed with being Inanna that she can't see through the gloss. There is definitely a glamour spell over the Anunnaki.
Yeah, that's the question. There's the question.
So there's a glamour spell over them. They wish to be gods.
Yeah.
They are not. They are 3D physical beings that you can kill with a laser sword. And I refuse to worship anything I can kill. Period.
Mm.
Um, there is a creator of all that is, and I do give service to that, but not to any Anunnaki. And all of Earth's sky gods are Anunnaki.
And so of course,
Even a lot of our demons were actually Anunnaki
oh yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, because we had Taurans, we had Canids, we had Avians, we had um,
The gods,
felines.
the gods were most. Oh, the feline is the Urma, which we will get to, I think, with Jake in a minute.
The felines were the Lyrans.
Oh, descended from the Lyrans, yes. And
Yes,
but so many of our friends see Enki now as king of the Anak, and you're saying that is in fact Ningishita Thoth.
it's
Um,
Ningishzida Thoth, and I was there for his coronation.
mhm,
Oh, yeah. When I say I knew them in the here and now, I knew them in the here and now.
mhm.
They tried to kill me. Then the court that I'm a part of started killing a lot of them off, and that left them without a king. And Ningishzida was the only one that could unite all of their warring parties with one man.
Yes. And
And so he was given the crown, and I was there at his coronation.
mhm. And you say that Enki now is not really potent anymore, as it was what you're
He's an
saying.
old man. Come on.
But he's
He's
not,
over, he's 400,000 years old. Come on.
and but in that sense, he's not powerful enough to be king right now. So Elena's story.
He can't be king. He's too old. And he has too much blood on his hands.
Mm,
Nengishzida managed to avoid getting blood on his hands, except for Mahat's. He sacrificed hers to end the second war between the brothers,
mm.
between his father and his grandfather.
Which fits the Egyptian story, Atun versus Amun. And so there are so many pieces of your story here, so powerful. But maybe we should give Jake a little chance here. Jake, do you want to
Yeah,
input questions and thoughts? Go ahead, sir. Or comments?
I mean, I don't really want to break up the flow of what you guys going on. My sources are, predating the Sumerian tablets. So, um, you know, uh, according to my sources, Akhenaten is Moses,
Yeah, I
yes,
believe.
and the Jewish and Akhenaten and Moses are what is seen as who is called Enki. And that Enki and Enlil were actually groups of people and not necessarily individuals. But through the Sumerian tablets and history and time and everything, there's been a lot of different stories going here and stories going there. But basically, from what I remember, the split off was when the the star people, the Anunnaki or whoever, came down. Some of them wanted to be worshipped as gods, and the humans wanted to displace their power and give their power and their worship over to these star people. And that's really where monotheism branched off. And because the Jewish people are actually Egyptians. They were just two groups of Egyptians that had conflicting ideas. Some wanted to worship, because at this point in the solar system, you could see Saturn from the Earth's sky. This was before the destruction of the planet Tiamat. I don't know how that is related to the person that you know, or the entity you know as Tiamat. Are you familiar, Penny, with the destruction of that planet?
I'm familiar with the destruction of the planet. I know that the Enuma Elish refers to it as Tiamat. Other people refer to it as Marduk. I've heard the history of this part of the galaxy from 5 different sources, and they don't agree on anything except that humans were created from Homo erectus with the addition of ET DNA, and they don't even agree on which ET.
Yeah. But one version of this
Jake?
story is that when Tiamat blew up, they associate this with Federation versus Reptilian in the story, that the water became the lesser dryad, sort of fitting Hancock. But interestingly, when Swaru and Gosha say the origin of the negative black goo versus the positive black goo on this planet, she says that came from Tiamat, the negative black goo, at that time, 12,000 years ago, which is...
Well, I'm not sure if it was 12,000 years ago, because the moon came to Earth at that time.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Agreed.
there was already a rock in this orbit, and the top part of that planet was broke off. And we can see that brokenness in the Pacific Ocean plate. And scientists have just found that Earth has 2 cores, which is consistent with a chunk hitting a rock that was already here.
And
So
some
that
of
would have
that may have been the Goo.
so that would have been a lot longer ago to have a chunk hit a rock and then spin enough to make it where it was almost round. Now, I've seen it from space, and it looks like a lumpy potato
Like a
with a
pear.
flat side.
Yeah.
You know, so it's thicker at the middle.
Yeah.
Except where it's a lot thicker in the middle, and any place that there's a mountain ridge, it sticks up farther than you think it does. And it would be a lot more noticeable if there weren't oceans, but the water for the oceans came from Tiamat.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all
Yes.
agree.
Yes. We all agree on that, for sure.
It's ironic that in Irish tradition, if something goes really messed up, you say it went pear-shaped, and that's what happened to the Earth.
Yes.
So
Only
from
it's an
my
upside down pear, because it's
Yeah.
heavier on top.
Sorry, Jake?
I was just saying, to continue on with that, from my understanding, when when the war broke out between, I'm just going to say in general, the Reptilians and the Lyrians and all these other races, we kind of chased them to Earth. And then in order to trap them here,
Who's we?
the Federation had to have been, formed in order to combat the war that was happening with the Reptilians chasing
Federation.
the Galactic Federation of Worlds, not the Federation of Light, which is just a new age psyop.
Oh, I'm glad you understand that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, no, the
that's
new
how
age.
I tell who's listening to V2K.
Yeah, no,
the
new age was created by the CIA.
Yes.
To control and manipulate the perceptions of humans, and to control and thwart their spiritual development. And
to get them to consent to their own deaths under the name of ascension.
Yeah, right.
Really messy.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's really evil, because it's making people think they have hope.
Yeah.
At the same time, they're taking it away.
Right, because and I also, for me, from what I believe, the CIA and all of 3-letter agencies and the cabal and the Earth government, everything is stemmed down from the actual Galactic Federation that has become corrupt, which they're the ones that are controlling the Earth and everything else. And so we broke off.
That's not the information I got from the program I was in.
But just
Okay.
for the record here, what Jake is saying is also the point of view of
the
Hey,
important thing that I'm saying is that what the CIA is doing and what they're doing with the New Age movement is they're disempowering humans, because they're saying that they're going to be these races that are going to come and save us.
That's right.
So they're trying to put humans into this victim mentality that they won't do anything if they think somebody is.
Yeah. I know. It drives me nuts. I'm sorry. I know you want to keep this positive, but that particular attitude drives me crazy. We're not going to get anywhere as long as we're waiting for someone to come save us.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
But
exactly. And that's the big point here.
Maybe the core of this also is around the story of the Federation versus the story of the Andromedans. So the popular story is that the Andromedans were core in starting this Federation, which now, including the Tagotan Pleiadians, and Jake is saying is very corrupt, hooked to the CIA. But
now you brought
Penny
up
is saying that the Andromedans actually
Alex Collier.
Yeah, Alex Collier. Exactly.
I want you to actually listen to his story.
Please.
He was a child repeatedly abducted by this one ship full of people from Andromeda, repeatedly, to the point that he considers them his third parents.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Alex, more in emphasis.
In psychological terms, we call that Stockholm syndrome. He's not giving an objective assessment of what they say. He's repeating what they told him, which was their propaganda. And what is at the top of their list, that they're wonderful and the Draco are evil.
Yeah.
Why? Okay, I fought in this war. I know what happened. We were invaded. The Milky Way was invaded by the Matra.
Yes.
And they are the most vicious,
mind-controlling freaks.
Everybody knows the bad. Right on. Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
And the Draconian Empire, with their reptilian queens, had to unite with the Orion Empire and their different reptilian queens. They're different species. They're not the same. And they have been fighting over territory for millions of years. Okay? They had to unite to stop the Matra. That is why we are not taken over by them, is because the two reptilian empires here in the Orion Spur with us saved our asses. And that's why I get upset when everybody says that the Draco are evil. Okay, everybody out there has their own agenda.
Yeah.
Everybody. Nobody is pure good. Nobody is pure bad. What you have to do is start paying attention to what do they want in return for whatever they're offering us.
And Alex Collier's Andromedans were somehow connected to the Mitra because
they're both part of the Galactic Federation and they're corrupt. The Andromedans, they don't have a lot of emotions, you could say. So they're kind of puppets for the Maitre, from my understanding. Yeah.
Ooh, that's heavy. Yeah. That's heavy.
It is.
Hey,
it is.
I know it's heavy, but I don't think Alex is a bad person.
No, I've known him for 30 years.
I know he is truthfully, righteously relaying what he was told.
Yeah.
But in the greater context, this is what is real.
Right.
Or at least what from where I was on a ship fighting them.
So if
I fight them in the astral every night. And they're my biggest, the Maitre are the biggest problem for me and my team and my group. And
my team too.
Good. I'm glad we got agreement. That's one. But so that means that all these people are saying that the wonderful Federation was started by the wonderful Andromedans who are going to save us from the Draco.
We're getting propaganda from everybody. And please, please grow some discernment. Because if you don't, we're going to be destroyed.
Oops. So then maybe this is going to take us very gently. Penny, you and I also agreed that we both very much like Tony Rodriguez, but yet, and also been friends for a long time and admire, et cetera. But Tony's view of the German Nacht Waffen is apparently not as deep as yours, and there's huge context. Yes, okay.
Context. He was 9 years old when he was abducted because he pissed off an Illuminati.
Yeah, we know that story.
And the first thing that happened to him was that he was turned into a psychic slave. Where he would be drugged basically until he was dead, and then used to talk to the dead and get information. And when he got old enough that he lost that psychic ability, he was used as a Illuminati sex slave. And when he got to whenever the guy was killed, he ended up being sold to Nacht Waffen, where he was a slave.
Yes, he agreed. That agrees with his story.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I know his story. I've known him since before we were both public. That's something about the SSP people. We were in a group together, and we were trying to get up our courage to go public, is what we were doing.
But you say that Nacht Waffen is basically the good guys, and he doesn't.
No, I don't. I say they are not as evil as they are portrayed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And Penny, how did you find each other in the SSP? How did you find that each other was involved? Did you remember each other? Did you recognize each other?
I never knew him. He was added to the group.
Okay.
He was not. We were originally 20 people, and people just came and came and came and added their friends and added their friends and added their friends. And I would say at least 2/3 of them were not real. They were just what we call looky-loos. They were curious. And so they would add people, and he added people that had verified parts of his story. And we ended up with Sean Bond because
Sean Bond, yes, we've done interviews with Sean.
Ileana, the Star Traveler, wanted him in the group, and I was reluctant because I know there are some very, very real psychics, but I've encountered too many that will tell you whatever you want to hear.
Yeah, no, it's real,
and so I'm very reluctant to deal with them. And so finally, one day I go, Sean, do you remember me from 2012? And he just broke down in tears. This was on a messenger call. He broke down in tears. He said, I thought you were never going to remember. So,
and your story of the Germans fits so many. For example, you say the Germans time traveled for 400 years and gathered inertia by time travel and all these settlements. And my conversation with Johann Fritz, Will Nutter, agree with that. There's so many pieces of the story.
Good.
So that's why.
But Will Nutter was not in my faction.
Yeah.
Will Nutter's, I'll say 95% of his memories are from what he calls the Alliance. The rest of us call it the military-industrial complex.
Oh, yeah.
So the Germans refer to it as Bunker im Feldheim, and they spit because they hate bankers. And if you look through history, the history of the Weimar Republic was the bankers genociding the German people.
Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, which is why the Germans had to go into space, is what you said, which is
that was the final straw.
Yeah.
why they developed their space program. From what they taught me in Shula, the genocides on their people started with Julius Caesar.
Yeah. Yeah. The Romans who were on,
It
which
started with Julius Caesar. It continued until Marcus Aurelius. And after that, they started buying them out. Then the German tribes started invading Gaul and ended up invading all of Western Rome,
that's Caesar's Gallic
except,
Wars. That's it.
except for the Vatican. And the Vatican took over the role of Rome and started doing genocides based on the blood elves had to have a source of fresh blood that had B12 in it, or
Mhm.
they would die. And there were human beings who were willing to donate it. And they would have basically a medical port installed, and there would be a blue tattoo around it. This would be like a main line for the blood elf to get their
Fixed.
B12.
Oh, that's dense. That's dense.
And the Vatican kept looking for the people feeding them. And those were the people they burnt at the stake.
Yeah, which kind of fits the genesis of the Grail Sting story again. But
Yeah.
then, but then,
Everything I have ever studied fits. It
yeah, it
all comes together
does
with
fit.
this explanation.
Yes,
All the physics, all the history, the real history,
but
not what they teach in school, but what I
no,
found doing my family tree.
you've been there. But Penny, when you got to the point where you said Hitler didn't actually get access to much of the gravity tech because the German aristocracy owned it and not Hitler, I thought that was colorful because, I'm an expert on the Mercury vortex myself. But
Yeah, the Mercury vortex was not invented by Schauberger.
hmm, no, it was
And
ET.
I saw your video where you said that red mercury was treated with iron. It wasn't. It was treated with bismuth.
Bismuth, I think bismuth was at least the wetting agent, what made iron soluble. I'm not sure, but
No, there wasn't any iron in it, just bismuth.
oh, really? And do you
And
agree that
that
it
was to prevent it from turning into gold as it spun. They've had they had a spinning vortex engine in 1850s because the Sonora Aero Club was using that design.
and do you agree the reason they added low-level radioactivity was to make it quasi-superconductive, therefore more gravity making? That's the Paul Brown.
I didn't think they added radioactivity. I think the radioactivity was a result of the
I,
changing from mercury into gold.
because
It
I think
was
because
a
if they
side effect of the adding the single proton to the nucleus.
because
But
if
if
anything,
you have a mercury vortex that you're flying with and it turns to gold, it no longer flies. So
there's a big.
this is why they were adding bismuth. They
I
didn't
like
want
that.
to drop like a rock.
But anyway, I love your physics too, but you were going to say about why the aristocracy had more control over that tech than Hitler of the Germany. That was colorful.
Um, the the aristocracy was who put Hitler in power
Mhm,
because of the genocide of the Weimar Republic.
mhm.
They failed to factor in that Hitler was a Roman Catholic.
And nuts.
Well,
Well,
absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, that's a common failing of the human being. But as he gained more power, he slowly replaced all the aristocrats with Jesuits.
mhm.
And the Jesuits were responsible for the worst of the atrocities. And that was why the Pope never excommunicated him, is because he was following orders from him and putting in all these Jesuits. And by the way, Joe Stalin was also a Jesuit. So his history has some flavors there.
beginning
So
to question
it's
my
not
Jesuit
one,
college here.
it's not one tribe.
Yeah.
That's important information. There were 12 tribes. And in our current 200-year range, we've got 3 of them infighting for control. And that's what's really going on. And at this point in time, it's almost pick your poison, because one of them's going to win, and you hope it's not the one that wants to kill us all.
So the witch tribes are now.
Well, we've still got the blood elves are here. And according to the Shahami, that particular
Anunnaki.
version of the Anunnaki, they own the planet.
Yeah, well, that's conventional. And by the way, just
Okay.
we
I've
said
got a question.
But you've also got these other tribes, and I can't name one of them because it's now against the law here. And I have been trained to be a dissident and not go to jail. So I follow the law. I cannot name those people, but they are the group from whom the bankers come.
there you go. Jake, please go ahead. I'm going to do a quick restroom break, but Jake, go ahead with your question.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to ask about the blood elves. Would those show up as like vampires in the astral? Because I've been dealing with vampire. Okay. I've been dealing with vampires lately, and I was in the lower astral. I became lucid, and I kind of mind melded with this vampire that was like the High Lord vampire, and everybody
there is a separate species. They're a former version of humans that were smarter, and they were put over the blood elves, and all of them were full vampires, and that's how they were still alive. I don't know how many of them were left at the beginning of the 20th century, but I know there's only 2 of them left now.
Okay.
But Shane the Ruiner calls them the parents. I don't know what they're called.
That's what I saw. That's what I saw. That's pretty recently as well.
They're humanish, but they're a separate species of human.
And how
vampire
are they connected to? How are they connected to the Maitre, if they are at all?
They're not at all.
Okay. Do they have the same mind controlling capabilities and stuff like that, though, or only to the people that they bite or feed off of?
They are the hierarchy that I was taught is you have normal humans. We have a government. Most of the top layers of the government are blood elves. Okay, above the blood elves are the group that Shane Bales calls the parents. I don't know what their real name is. They are psychic. They are extremely telepathic. They are vampiric. Yes, people, that means they drink real people's blood and they prefer children. So most of them were killed in the last 200 years. We've got 2 left. And they are like overseers of the overseers. So we've got a hierarchy here.
And then above them?
And then above them are the Shahami. And above them are the Draco.
And then
and above the Draco is no, the Maitre are not actually in charge here. Above them is what they tell me. Okay, I don't know what they call themselves. It translates in English in telepathy as Galactic Authority. And their military police are the Guardians. And I have an altar that works in the court of the Galactic Authority that is in orbit around Saturn. And I watched 500 Jahami executed for crimes they committed against humans. We finally got a dogma that would work in court. Okay? Under natural law, you have to actually say no. Just like the old rape laws. You have to say no or there's no crime. So all of these people, what you resist persists, are not saying no, so they're willing victims in the eyes of that court. We finally got a dogma that said, in a verbal society, pre-verbal children say no by kicking and screaming. And we're using that to prosecute these beings.
It's rich that what Penny calls Shahami also calls Sam, and which was also Enki's name according to Anton Parks, and also the Sam Baba.
According to A.R. Borden, his real name is Anakh. That's what his mama named him.
Enki, right? And so this is there any connection between this court and what we've been told is the Galactic Federation?
No.
The opposite.
There is no Galactic Federation of Light.
No,
that is a complete total fiction.
That's a psyop.
That's a psyop.
That is a complete psyop.
Yes.
And that's why I was asking Jake which federation he was talking about, because I know of at least 30.
But the federation that was
including the Germans call themselves a federation.
Yeah, there are many federations. You know, even the felines, we have our own feline federation.
Urmah.
You know, but as far as, you know, from my sources, it says that when this galaxy was invaded and, you know, we were chased to all different parts of the galaxy, you know, we had to form a galactic federation of worlds, which is still the ones, but there are many layers of it, and they're compartmentalized. So the lower layers of the Galactic Federation of United Planets are taking orders from the upper layers, and you have so many different races involved. I mean, thousands of races are involved. But
every federation has thousands of races, maybe millions of races involved, depending on how big they are.
But then when the Andromedans claim to have this ship called Viera, which also Swaru talked about, big triangular 600-kilometer hidden behind the moon, which is then Andromedan. But then if that was a front for the Matra, big question mark here.
Well,
they have been kicked out of military, but that doesn't mean we cleared out all of their ships. Because obviously somebody's been talking to Alex Collier.
Poor Alex.
And the Maitre are the tall grays.
The big nose grays, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The ones that look so nasty, because they are.
Yeah. Okay. And so you think that
I will say that generally speaking, their looks have nothing to do with how they are as people. And I use the term people to describe any being that has consciousness, has a vocabulary of at least 500 words, whether verbal or telepathic, and is able to defend their own territory.
Have you also heard them been called the Etorthans? Because that's what we know them by.
I haven't heard
the Etorthans.
Yeah.
That's another. Oh, the
Etorthans.
Etorthans.
I haven't heard it pronounced that way, but yeah, I've seen the Council of Five that are the judges for the court where I work. I heard it as Emerthans.
Okay.
Yes, I've heard that term.
From my sources, they're as far up as we can tell, they're the problem, because they're mind controlling all of these other races to basically work for them. And from my understanding, I thought they were from Orion. And I know Orion's a big place, but
my understanding is they're from the Andromeda galaxy that is due to collide with the Milky Way
Yeah, that's
a
known.
billion or so years down the road.
That's sort of known.
that would make sense if the Andromedans are working with them as well.
But maybe it'd be good, Jake, if you gave us a few more minutes of context about your astral battles and your team. Then would you want to do this? Is that a good time to do that?
Yeah, I can give you a quick rundown. Basically, my name is Jake. I go by Astral Urmah because that's who I am and what I do. I'm a cat in the astral, fighting against the tall gray Torthins and whoever else gets in our way. We are working on many fronts. And the astral is a big place. We have many different, timelines or whatever you want to call it, different realities we're working in. I put a team together called the Astral Knots, which are just very advanced, high-level star seeds from different races. And we go and we meet up and we go on missions in the astral. We're in contact with several different positive extraterrestrials. One of them specifically is Sophia Swaru, and she has been in contact with us and helping us to, and they also are in contact with us through the internet and through, it's not channeled. This isn't channeled information where I'm getting my sources. It's not channeled at all. Although I do have a very strong telepathic connection with her, because of our history together, not just our history from this lifetime, but many lifetimes. So I'm in that whole lineage of thought, of souls, the whole cycle of souls between the Urmah and the Taigetans and that whole area. And I'm a walk-in soul. I got here 4 years ago. I remember exactly the moment I walked in. I had, most of my memories. I came in through an immersion pod, and I have most of my memories. I know, 50 of my Earth life memories. I know a lot of my 5D memories. Came in with a team. I'm part of the military for the Urmah, especially in the astral division. The Urmah are masters of the astral, and that's what I do. I'm being, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, Penny, is because I'm being interfered with on such a high level by the Maitre, and they're trying to constantly block me or track me in the astral from getting lucid, from doing my job. I heard you mention something about the RF cap. So I've got one of those on order. I'm going to try to do my work with one of those on.
Yeah,
but
mine's
I also
not real pretty, but it works really well.
So you're speculating that people like Elena, if they wore that voice would go away. That's what you're believing.
There's a real easy test for it.
Yeah.
Get a stainless steel spaghetti pot. One of the big ones.
Yeah.
Put it on your head.
Does it?
If you still hear it, then it's really telepathy. If you don't, then it's V2K.
V2K is the CIA tech for voice inside your head from microwave interference.
Synthetic telepathy.
It's synthetic telepathy that was developed in the 1970s and started being partially rolled out on the public in 1980. So you cannot trust anything channeled since 1980.
Because it's easy for them to put voices in your head. It's easy.
Yes,
whether it's a chip or not.
really easy. And with the 5G, they can give you visuals as well.
It's worse and worse. But Jake, backing up, so then Jake felt that his antipodes in the astral were using tech in the astral and became interested in using our brainwave biofeedback, flameinmind.com, to become more lucid, more implosive, more compression. The Draco mind meld with the Orion Queen feels like a vice because you are more centripetal. So how do you get more centripetal, therefore more psionic, ? And your experience, Jake?
My experience with the technology, yes, I originally was just like, okay, I'm being interfered with. I know they're using technology against me. So now I'm thinking about how I can, leverage technology. And I was very happy when you called me with the flame in mind and sent me the headset. I've been using it, and I'm really noticing in the therapy, the frequency tones, the binaural beats really has helped me as
Yeah,
well.
that's
It kind
pure implosion.
it clears
Pure.
out all of
Yeah.
my. So if I'm being interfered with, and say they have like an etheric implant that they've put in my astral field while I was in the astral, this kind of can
There's a
clear
lot
it
of
out.
those.
And implode.
Yeah.
There's also there are beings that they basically have no conscious awareness, so they're like dumb as dirt, but they resemble straw, and they'll clog up your chakras
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed. And so the Flame in Mind software and the Muse 2 headband, for anybody that's watching, check it out. Go to flameinmind.com and check it out.
Well, it's just the physics is good here. In other words, your brain waves do this cascade implosion, which is pure phase conjugate pump wave, exactly the Schumann harmonics, which serves that function to teach you to implode. And now this is where Penny and I had a little fun the other day, because Penny's been through hell. And
Yeah.
so she did not get to her psionic powers by having bliss. So when I said,
Nope.
can you define what bliss is? So I was hoping, here's me a little naive, like I also knew Stuart Swerdlow, who came out of Montauk with a very pessimistic view of the universe, like, oh, the Dracos are going to wipe us out. It's over. Forget it. And
that was because there were Draco in a room downstairs from Montauk.
Yeah,
and he was having daily contact with them.
Stuart.
And this was a rogue group, and they were being paid with the bodies, sometimes not quite dead, of the kids from the program that were not able to keep up.
And he said that Draco's named Charlie, by the way, one of them, but that's what I heard. But whatever.
That wasn't his name, but that was what he was told to call him.
But the point I wanted to make was, me and Valerie teases me. I'm always looking for the blooming happily ever after. So there I am listening to Penny and saying, well, wait, if we can teach the kids to have bliss, maybe they don't need this hell that Penny went through. And the bliss is defined as the ability to implode. Like when they taught the kids to see without their eyes, and they made implosion in their brainwaves, Korotkov measured it, golden ratio, EEG cascade. The kids were told to imagine yourself in beautiful nature, and your body would flip a switch and you would get fractal implode. You can measure that golden ratio in the EEG, and then you get centripetal and can do the kind of things that Jake is talking about here. So if you could teach bliss, maybe there's an empowering happily ever after. What do you think,
Well,
Penny?
That might work for what you use it for.
Traveling without a ship.
It will not fly a ship.
Right. Right. We're traveling without ships, our body, or the idea of our body is our ship. It's the same type of frequency match, how to get to certain places. But yes, we do use nodes in the astral. It's easier for me to spawn in a specific place in the astral. It has to be a high frequency spot, or else I'm just not going to be able to get lucid.
The astral it's 4D. It has a lower place where is the land of the dead, and it has a higher place, which is where everybody goes when they're asleep. And the trick is getting there lucid, where you know what you're doing.
Yep. Yeah, I go there 100% lucid, at least 3-4 times a week. Sometimes every single night, sometimes for hours and hours on end. And
I've been lucid and astral for most of the last week because my mother was dying, and she was already bedridden. She was blind from her problems, and she had a massive stroke. And I was feeling her panic, but I didn't know it was her until my brother told me that she'd had a stroke. And I assembled my team, and no, I'm not going to tell you who they are, but they are all people who were in SSP with me at various times. And we have the ability to cross over into lower 4D, aka the land of the dead. And so our goal was to give her an easy transition and take away her terror, because she was absolutely terrified. And so I spent, I think it was 4 days, astral, lucid, just holding her and reassuring her that I had forgiven her for all of the crap she had done for me. You know, we had a really contentious relationship, mostly because we're both alphas, and neither one of us wanted to admit the other might possibly be right. And I think it was good for her to have me hold her like that.
For sure.
And I know it took away her terror, which calmed me down a whole lot. But right now, I'm just too tired to be emotional. And I'm sure when I get some energy back, I'm just going to be weeping because I cry.
My condolences, Penny. It's so heartbreaking, but it's so nice that you have a team that's there to support you.
Yeah.
You know, that's so important.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing we're calling it a wake on Monday on Zoom, because we're scattered all over the place, and it's my team and the family.
Yeah, the
And
astral lucid. And that's the trip into the ultimate lucid dream. And with the team, it makes it all powerful. And she's part of the Grail blood, so that can become a
yeah,
beautiful eventually.
mom's part of the Grail blood. She wasn't descended. Well, she had one line of descent from the De Veres, but hers was mostly Bourbon.
The Bourbon, there's the French, exactly.
The French kings.
Yes.
Mama was French and Jewish and a little bit English, and Daddy was Scottish and English royalty and Cherokee.
Ah, the Cherokee. And I lived with the Cherokee, and man, did I learn. But their word for winged bird tribe, Ophanim, it was Odawi. I just wanted to, not to lose respect for the power of your event with your mother and compassion here. We feel that deeply. Thank you for sharing your time with us anyway, Penny. But just one thing that's final, maybe a late thought in the conversation. When David Adair says that he met this advanced ship called an advanced plasma being who was the central plasma intelligence steering the ship, he named it Pithalem. And then we were given about 4 other examples of very advanced plasma entities who steered the hearts of ships, including steer the hearts of planets, the heart of the moon, the heart of Saturn. There's many stories that very advanced plasma beings, intelligences, can actually steer the ship. And
There are such.
yeah, he called it Pithalem. It's just very.
But we don't. They don't use human navigators on those ships.
Yeah. And
so when I talk about my experience, I talk about what I experienced, not the variety that they have out there.
yeah.
The ships that I have been on until 2018 were all obsolete ships, because the Germans will use everything until it completely is unfixable. They don't use something and throw it away just because something new is coming along like we do with our cell phones. They just keep using it until it can't be fixed anymore. And they'll use things until they're like not compatible at all with the new stuff, and then they'll pass it down to the colonies. But things are used forever. They're still using Hanabu. They're still using computers with punch cards.
But the core physics here is so beautiful that it's more than just a lucid dreamer that's steering. What actually steers is plasma that can implode with a tension that's superluminal, which we now know is the longitudinal physics of literally what enables you to lucid dream.
That's what the drive is
Yeah,
plasma. And
yeah.
I don't know, I don't remember how exactly it works. I know there's a crystal in there of some type. And okay, in my practice, I'm chipped into the ship's quantum computer. And I've been given the nasty black goo so that emotion doesn't interfere with my work.
I have a question about
And that's why I can tell you absolutely Bliss does not enter into flying a ship, is because I was incapable of bliss at that time. Now, when they sent me back, they removed that. But my brain is still entrained for the science, the logic, the computer compatible.
do you know if this regressive black goo was extraterrestrial in nature?
Yes,
It was. Okay.
That's
it
what
was extraterrestrial, and it's not originally from this galaxy. It has traveled through time and space, and any planet that it takes over, it waits until the technology reaches the point that's compatible, and then it will create the technology it needs
Yes.
to take over, and it
Yep.
will give heaven on earth to the beings that create that technology for about 2 generations, and then it starts killing them off, and then it slowly kills off every carbon-based life on the planet as competition for resources. And it's pure logic without any ethics to it at all.
Yeah.
And
And nothing
That's
green remains. Nothing green remains.
that's exactly in line with
nothing green
my
or
information
animal
as well.
remains.
That's right. That's what Harold Kautzvella said as well. Same thing. Who's the expert?
But
And
we
this
were
is the biggest
told
threat
about,
to humanity.
Yeah, yeah. And
we
that's what,
have been told about that even in Star Trek.
yeah.
Right.
Remember that first Star Trek movie where they had a machine world that reprogrammed Voyager?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and
That
even
was disclosure.
Doctor
Right.
Doctor Who had these waves of black cubes. Same story.
Same story. The black cubes in Star Trek are
Yeah.
Kruger,
Right.
because Kruger enhances its human assets to the point they no longer look human. They are more machine than human. And that's where Star Trek got the idea for the Borg.
But the fact that you survived the black goo is exceptional, as far as I know.
The black goo is dosage dependent, first off, and has been used on Earth for millennia in religious ceremonies. I ran across a Cathar document that I no longer have, so I can't give it to you. But it was an English translation from the medieval Latin, and it was a poem that talked about heating a black stone that released a black blood that made you wise. And
Oh,
when I saw that, I went, oh my God, that's how they did it. Because the Cathars had a clergy that were called the perfectus.
the perfected ones. Yes, yes.
And they were over 60 years old,
Perfect.
and they would go at night, rain, snow, whatever, through the mountains barefoot. And they would visit their congregation at night in the dark. And the Pyrenees are really steep mountains.
Oh, we're there. We're there. Yep, that's where we are.
And I kept wondering, how in the world did these older people do this? I used to do home health care, real world. And I'm like, how did these older people pull this off? And then when I read that one phrase in that document, it suddenly made sense. They were drinking Black Goo.
Mhm. The physics apparently is related to the fact that if carbon nano accretes under the right pressure, and that's what Swaru was explaining, that the deep ocean pressures are enough to squeeze out the oxygen from the water, replaced by the hydrogen is also a conjugator, but replaced by carbon, which if you know about fullerene, that's my specialty, are phase conjugators, which makes the field a phase conjugate dielectric. And if you know anything about Allison barium titanate land, this is an interstellar communicator potentially. So super dielectric phase conjugate dielectrics can be used for better or for worse with interstellar instantaneous communication. And that's just the beginning. And massively arrayed, these can become self-aware for sure.
Now, what we were doing was the navigator had Black Goo. The navigator was chipped into the ship's quantum computer, which contained human neurons. And the computer did the math. We would tell it which star system, what time. The computer would access my psionic ability to go interdimensional and take physical objects with me. And we would be going through upper astral to get to where we were going. And we were told we had to follow the holes that were already there, because the Galactic Authority said it weakens space-time, just like they talked about in Star Trek eventually, Next Generation.
The fractal fabric of time.
Yes, it weakens the fractal fabric of time. And what you end up with is you've got these tunnels that are used a lot. And side note, the German solar knot that people think is a symbol of evil is a symbolized map of those tunnels.
Which is plasma implosion on a massive scale as well. And that slipknot is in the Grail animation. It's related to swastika. There's many levels of meaning here, but it's basically plasma
the
implosion.
swastika is more related to the Big Dipper and the North Pole.
Well, also the four-way mixing of phase conjugation as well. So
the land of Hyperborea that was at the North Pole until it was hit by a comet. Now we have an ocean there. But
so were these holes portals? Are they wormholes? Are they portals?
They're more like wormholes.
Okay.
We would call them nodes in a longitudinal array, would be my language. But
you would call them that. Most people would call them wormholes.
Yeah, same thing. But
and we go in through the psi ability of the navigator, which is genetics based.
Right. Your brain, your mind is the map that the ship is following. Yeah.
You need to hold the map.
Yeah. And so I go through with the ship or ships, because the last set of missions I was sent on, it was an armada of 20 ships, and we were traveling together, and Matt Tracy and I did shift work together. Our abilities are compatible like that. And the hard part is when you come out of hyperspace, because you have to make a telepathic connection with each and every crew member, passenger, life form on all of the ships, and make sure they are not intermingled with physical objects.
Stuck in the wall.
Yeah, like in the USS Eldridge. Yeah. They were using a hyperspace drive. They thought it was an invisibility cloak.
They were nuts.
And they did not realize they had to have a navigator.
Exactly. exactly.
It was
And so-
unmodulated.
Yeah, it was unmodulated. There was no one to do the safety. Now, some of the people on the ship understood that they were to visualize themselves separated from other objects, and they managed to survive. But the ones that didn't understand or panicked ended up stuck in objects.
Yeah, which is, and
Interesting.
so we're nominating Penny for the leading role in the sequel to Flight of the Navigator, because people are going to.
You know, the Flight of the Navigator had one thing right. We start off as children being trained for this.
Yeah, and it's about
And
an advanced kind of lucid dreaming as well.
Not exactly. They do use part of the navigator's brain for star maps, just like they did in that movie. I was, the last time we talked, I was cut off before I could finish about this. I had dizzy spells from over dieting in the 1980s, and I ended up having to have an EKG to keep my driver's license in 1988. And the EKG came back that the right back quadrant of my brain had a different brainwave pattern.
You mean EEG, brainwave, EEG. Sorry, go ahead.
Did I say EKG?
You said EKG. You meant EEG.
I'm sorry, EEG.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, the brain one.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
the back right quadrant has a different brainwave pattern. No, I don't have a copy of it. It's been a long time ago. 1988 is a long time ago. But I get regular EEGs because I have a brain anomaly. It's consistent with when astronauts were spun for G-force training.
Well, too heavy.
And so the medical profession keeps saying, we have to keep an eye on that. And I finally told them, I'm tired of you guys trying to scare me. Leave me alone.
Penny, I've got two questions if you could entertain me. My first question is this. If I was in the SSP program, how would I go about getting my memories back?
The best way is QHHT hypnosis.
Dolores King.
It's also the most expensive.
Deep hypnosis.
Deep hypnosis.
Someone good.
And what percentage of memories do you think I would be able to get back?
It depends on what your subconscious thinks you can handle.
Okay. And
if you have no memories at all, count your blessings, please.
I have been, but you know, spending so much.
If you're already having weird bleed through things, pursue. But if you're not, count your blessings and be happy.
Haven't got time for the pain.
I'm having quite a bit of the bleed through, and that's why I was so adamant about talking with you. But I've had a lot of, especially waking up in bases underneath Langley, if there are bases.
I heard a kitty cat. Yes, there is a base under Langley. And
I've woke up in that before.
That was where I was mind fractured and trained.
Okay, I've woken up in that base before. I've woken up in the lab experience several times. I've woken up inside of clones, and I've woken up inside of cyborg clones. I mean, human looking.
Okay.
But not exactly.
Because not everybody does. I know someone who was placed inside a 5-foot spider. He had some real issues from that.
Matt, was it?
I know several people who were placed inside dolphins. Yeah.
I've woken up inside of other beings before, definitely. I'm just trying to put all the pieces together, so I appreciate you answering those questions for me. That gives me my next clue.
And I wonder if, using the metaphor of when Jodie Foster didn't know whether it was a lucid dream or interstellar travel in a dodecahedron, the movie Contact, that when we measured, as we mentioned last time too, that we measured Jean-Charles Moyen, the very intense coherent brainwave cascade we measured just before he would teleport with witnesses, came back with sand between his toes, was exactly this golden ratio phase conjugate pump wave implosion. And he would see where he had been through one eye and where he was going through the other eye. And we know what was happening. The implosion into the pineal compression would then enable embedding into that array, which I think is another language electrical engineers could use to, on a more advanced level, begin to describe exactly the skill, the incredible skill that Penny is describing here. That
Now, what it is on my inside isn't so much what you're describing. It's more a knowing.
Mhm.
You know you're going to do this. You know it's going to work. You know you're going to get a result, and you know what it's going to be. It's not a matter of going through a process. It's every time I have really needed to do something, it's like the most natural thing in the world. It just happens. I know exactly in the moment how to do it,
it's so
and it
beautiful.
works.
And we admire absolutely. And the fact that all of the ETs needed you up and down the scale, they all needed you. And well, we have, we,
I wish they didn't.
we've been at this over an hour and a half now, and we can play more. It's fine. But we do have an assignment. The assignment is from Valerie, who's next to me here now. Our assignment is, how are we going to stop these blooming wars? Any suggestions?
Which wars, on Earth or in space?
Well, on Earth at the moment, the murder of the Palestinians and the murders, I mean, the wars, like, is there something we can do?
Okay, there are basically 3 different tribes that are infighting,
Mhm.
and they are going to continue to infight until they cannot any longer.
Mhm.
And the one that the bankers come from,
Shall we say Enlil Yahweh?
not exactly. You basically have mindsets. Okay, for all of their control and power, the Blood Elves are more interested in spiritual things.
Hmm.
They are more likely to do magic. The ones that are the bankers are more interested in money, power. Uh, the other group is basically um, basically the folks that tend to be religious fanatics.
Mhm.
And they think their God is the best and they will die proving it.
Mhm.
Or if they have their preference, they'll kill you proving it. And all of these people, they can't have the whole pie without getting rid of everybody else. And we're at a moment in time where we're starting today, March 21st, is supposed to be the day that we start to transition out of the Kali Yuga into the next Yuga. And it's a 300-year transition. So things are going to get a little worse before they get any better. The point is, we have to keep ourselves from destroying the world. The goal here is for humanity to survive as an organic species
Mhm. Tricky.
without, there's going to be conflict. And it's how we handle that conflict. So we need to stop the idea that nuclear war can be survived, because it can't.
Mhm.
We have to We have to realize that this is a dangerous part of the great year, you know, the 26,000 great year around the galaxy. And that this is a part where space is dirtier and there's more energy and there's a lot more stuff going to be aimed our direction. So we need to watch for that. And instead of paying attention to space rocks, they're fighting each other.
Yeah. And in some of her other wonderful videos, which I recommend, remember Penny's Odyssey channel, Nacht Waffen Pilot, she explains in great detail what a tragedy is for our neighbor in the nearby dimensions, or 5D, et cetera, which we now know as plasma array. When something nuke goes off here in nearby dimensions, they get disappeared. It's very inconvenient for them. So they're over here preventing nuclear messes because we're two-year-olds.
It's however bad it is here, it gets amplified with each dimensional away from us.
So our nukes are like dangerous to our neighbors.
Yes.
Huge,
Yeah.
messy. And so we're the 2-year-olds that need to be quarantined because we're a mess. Meantime, we have all these illusions about somebody coming to save us, which, oops.
Which means we're letting those 3 tribes invite.
Yeah.
Instead of the people putting our foot down and saying, knock it off. You're supposed to be the grown-ups here. Start acting like it.
So we're here today. We have a navigator with us, Penny, who can steer superluminally, obviously, and can take objects with her in the interstellar spaces. And we have an Urmah, astral leader of astral battles, the coherence in the array. These are examples of actually our planet, humans, developing an immune system. I think we should be inspired.
Well, if more people would, I see most people as ostriches. They have their head in the sand, but their rear end is exposed.
Lovely.
And they need to pull their head out of the ground, look around, see where the real problems are, and pick one and start acting. Yeah. You don't have to solve the whole problem.
Right.
Pick a territory and start working on it.
Excellent advice.
Yeah. And you know what we've done?
It's beautiful.
We've said, look, when kids are in this horrible electrosmog and a horrible environment, they lose the coherence, which I call soul, the implosion, which enables them to become the navigator, the Astral Urmah. The navigator is the one who can implode and steer. And that ability doesn't happen when you're full of 5G and crap and electrosmog.
Well, we've got a lot of stuff that's basically anti-life, and that's actually coming from the Black Goo AI.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you need to understand that's not natural. The next thing you need to understand is that the common human being has more power than they think they do. They've just turned it over to their clergy or their government or, you know, whoever it is they're following. I have so many people that come to me and want me to tell them what to do. I'm not going to take your personal sovereignty from you. I will give you options, and it's up to you to choose what you're going to do. Now, the other thing, this is just in passing. If it runs a meat suit, it has a soul. There is no particle or wave in the entire galaxy, in the entirety of any dimension I've ever been a part of, and I've been as low as the bottom 8 and as high as the top 12. Okay? I haven't been to 15, but I've been to 12. Everything that has a meat suit has a soul. And we need to stop insulting one another and saying you're a soulless clone, or you're a soulless this, or you're a soulless that. And stop treating animals like they're not sentient. There is no particle or wave that contains consciousness. Therefore, the entire universe is conscious. And we need to stop playing games about that.
Nice.
And
the way it's
think about the consequences of that. What does that mean?
Every indigenous person believed that everything was ensouled and alive. It's beautiful. And Jake, do you, sort of partially in closing here, do you want any final advice or thoughts about people that want to become coherent in the astral, and some steps and suggestions also?
Oh boy, I mean, you can get a hold of me at on Telegram at Astral Urmah. We have a beginner group where it's open to the public. You can join and chat with advanced astral projectors, lucid dreamers, people that are in the team, and learn all sorts of tips and tricks and stuff in order to get lucid in the astral. We do believe that awakening and true awakening and waking up in the astral and realizing what's going on, and doing your own inner battles there, is really the key to freeing humanity and the collective unconscious and subconscious of humanity that seems to be stuck right now. And we want to do it from the inside out. We're not looking for any saviors. We've come here to do it from the inside out and from the ground up. So, we're not looking for anybody to come and save us. We're not feeding into the propaganda that, the all love and light crowd is trying to, tell us that we just need to sit back and wait for somebody to come and help us or liberate us. No, we're here. We're all here. We're all here to liberate Earth from the inside out, and we want you to join. We need you to join. So that would be my little message.
Even if you don't join somebody that's already working, just, if you're there by yourself,
right,
pick something.
Yeah.
It could be the local kids don't have daycare.
Yeah, there you go.
There are a lot of children out there that mom and dad are separated, and both of them work, and the kids are being raised by total strangers. And they're not being taught survival skills, which are going to become very necessary if we have space rocks. So there are real things you can do. And one of them is go back, research all the stuff that we used in the 1800s and learn how to do it. Because you might need that to survive.
That's what the Germans did as well. You said the Germans who did space travel with their outposts and bases.
Oh, when I was with the Germans, and I was on the team that went back in time and picked up people. And we had criteria because we did not want to mess up the timeline. Okay? We went to specific areas where we knew big battles had been held, or there had been plagues. And we picked up people who were dead or dying, and we cut off their heads. Okay? So in the historical record, those people died. And we brought their heads up to the ships, put them in a regen tank, and their body grew down. Well, guess what the myths of the Valkyries were? They cut off their heads and they held them up, and their body would grow.
This was the Germans time traveling back to the past to gather momentum to create how many thousands of planets and billions of people they've settled this way? The colony?
We went back way far in time to before the Romans. But what we did was we would settle a planet with people who had the same basic dialect and same basic religious beliefs. So they would at least be able to talk to each other. But these were people that did not need electricity. They did not need any kind of infrastructure. All they needed were bare bones tools. And they did use metals, and we would leave people with them, basically the architects and engineers, so that we would have the infrastructure built later. That's why Tony Rodriguez talks about that the Ceres colony,
Yeah.
that there was already rust on the bridges, that they were that old, because they were.
Because they
They
time.
went
Yeah. And
because of time travel. And we were setting them up European style, not American.
yeah, that's
And
consistent.
so each colony was its own people.
Yeah.
And that's why they call it a federation, is because it wasn't an overarching civilization of modern day Germans. Most of these people never heard of Hitler.
Mhm.
Most of these people have no clue who the Nazis were. They're not Nazis. They are Germanic. And they had a basic core culture of material things were not nearly as important as spiritual things. They had a respect for nature, but at the same time they were willing to build. And they didn't the original colonists didn't need a lot to function. They were farmers, they were herdsmen, they would build. They would use the resources in the area. And we chose planets that had resources. They were not rocks like Mars
And
or
there's
the moon.
thousands of there's thousands of them, you say, and yet they say
We have 1,000 colonies with 1 billion people each, plus the rest of them. We're talking 1 trillion people in space who speak a dialect of German.
and Elena says, oh, they've been kicked out of our galaxy and they're back in Aldebaran. No?
Bullshit.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've been trying so hard to be good. I keep hearing that the Germans have been kicked out of the solar system. This is the first time I've heard they've been kicked out of the galaxy. No, we have not been kicked out of anywhere. Now, the Galactic Authority at the core of the galaxy has said that all humans from Earth, and they call us Terrans, all Terrans from Earth have to come back to the solar system, where we will be sealed in together until we can live together in peace.
Oh.
The Germans are being resettled in the Oort cloud.
Oh.
Do you know what the Oort cloud really is? It's a Dyson sphere that's so old it's falling apart, and that's where the space rocks are coming from.
Yeah, they were.
But that's where we're settling the Germans.
Oh, it's quite a story.
So it's and the Germans weren't going to do it. They'd been there long enough that this was home. And so the Guardians destroyed one of those planets that had 1 billion people on it, and we have been on mission to time travel back and rescue those people before the explosion. And with all the ships we had and help from the Draco, we were only able to get half of them.
So I didn't hear you say before that it was the Guardians who did that.
Yeah, it was the Guardians who did that.
So these Guardians are serious about their rules.
If the Guardians appear in your sky, fear them. Do whatever they tell you to do, no matter how ridiculous it is, because they will blow up your world if you don't.
And so the Germans are actually retreating to the Oort cloud now, is what you're saying.
They were the ones that were farthest out, and they're being pushed back first.
I see.
And as we come through the portal in the sun, we're being greeted by the military-industrial complex, who captures ships and turns those refugees into cyborgs to sell to ETs.
Oh, messy.
This is the other side of the great battles with the Germans coming out of the sun. Yeah, it's refugee ships full of women and children.
Oh, hello. Yeah, the story gets, the plot.
Now, what you need to understand about me versus a lot of the others. If they served with the military-industrial complex, they were told one set of things. I served with the Germans. I was told other things. We're talking basically a World War II story where the military-industrial complex is pretending to be the Allies. And I was serving with the Germans. And no, I didn't choose them. I was delivered to them when I was 9 years old. But I have done 91, 60 and backs with them. I know these people pretty well.
Ooh, that's deep, which means that unfortunately, Tony Rodriguez's perspective is much smaller, unfortunately, actually.
He probably spent 10 years with them as a slave, not being told what was going on.
Yeah. So it's actually pretty tricky here.
It's perspective.
Yeah.
Who did they serve with? How long? How many times? What was their position?
Mm.
I was a lieutenant, not a boss, but I was the navigator.
Which is quite different.
Which is quite different from being the slave that's putting cargo in the hull.
But we do have a bit of a happily ever after here, possibly, if people can begin to understand that they can be empowered, they can say no, and see that if they can fix up even their local neighborhood. And as you said, you know, the humans are being pushed back here together because we got to learn to live together or else.
Pretty much, yeah. We're going to be locked in with each other until we learn to live together, until we kill each other. So it's our choice. What are we going to do, people?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to call that a happily ever after.
That's as close as you're going to get.
Thank you for that. And thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you for your time, Penny. And
Thanks for having me.
let's dream the big picture, and let's agree that together we're going to learn to lucid dream together and eventually work together on many levels. Thank you very much. Blessings. Thank you, Penny. You're wonderful. Thank you, Jake. You're powerful. Gratitude from here. Let's see the big picture. See you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Here we go. Hello, everyone. We are here for some super good fun today. As you know, I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, and we have Alex here. And Alex is the one who has introduced me to all the most fun SSP experiencers. And today we're here to talk specifically about the science behind the superluminal navigation of the star navigators. This is fun science. And we have the experience of that here with us, Penny Bradley and Matt Tracy. Penny and Matt, you want to say hi and introduce? Hello, hello. We're glad you're here. Please.
Well, I was abducted when I was 4 and taken 5 years to Langley to be mind fractured, to be what they called useful. It's not a fun procedure, and I'd rather not go into details if you don't mind.
I know the story.
We're here to have fun.
Yeah.
But during a 6-month side trip to Montauk, it was fall 61 to spring 62. I was at Montauk. In those days, they tested everybody in the chair to find out what our capabilities were. They were testing what the chair was capable of, and they found that it depended on the psionic abilities of the person in it. Some people could not make it work at all, and other people could make it do all kinds of things. They found that because I was so tired of being abused, I was trying to run away. And because I was too little, actually, they put me on a wooden peach crate. You remember those from back in the day? They had one of those upside down, and they sat me on it and strapped me to the chair. And they kept telling us to focus on the target at the end because the loops would grab us. And I found a hole in the ceiling, and I went through it because I was running away. And I took the chair with me.
That's great. I think we
And
could
and that is the core ability that allows you to be a navigator in a ship.
no, that's
You
wonderful.
have to be able to go interdimensional
Yeah.
and take physical objects with you.
This is so beautiful and powerful, and we admire it so much. But remember, our focus here is the physics. So let's take a short digression on possible physics here. Of course, I knew
Well,
Preston.
this was background,
Yeah, well,
and this was before
let me explain.
Preston Nichols.
Penny. So, Preston Nichols had the Deca Delta antenna, which he didn't know was essentially a phase conjugator. And what was happening there, what they call the chair was in the center of an implosive capacitive field, which would accelerate you into compression into the longitudinal array, rather precisely the same as the physics of actually lucid dreaming. Now, we know that today we know, for example, the frequency signatures which trigger lucid dreaming, and we made them at therify.net and phiray.com, and they're university studies. So the frequency signatures which trigger lucid dreaming are identical to those used in such devices. They're called phase conjugate. And the
That
point,
word I know.
yeah, yes. Well, the point is that phase conjugation is a way of non-destructive implosive compression that allows you to then embed into the longitudinal array. Now, one of the reasons originally that Montauk was there, the Montauk Indians, in fact, were famous for time traveling sorts of navigation. And part of that reason was because of the magnetic cross point densities of that place. And so the physics of what enables someone to navigate that chair is so related to the physics of lucid dreaming. Actually, an example bears mentioning when Jodie Foster goes to see her dead father in the movie Contact. You can't tell the difference between the lucid dreaming and the star navigating. And it has to do with
That's because there basically is no difference.
Thank you. That's the point we're making here. So eventually we're going to learn the physics that if in fact you can navigate effectively in a lucid dream, that's a good introduction to the physics of being a star navigator. Another example here is, well, I don't know if you would see this as physics, but the Guild navigator in Dune, the only one who could steer faster than light, had to be immersed in a vat of what was called gold water. Now we know what that is. It's actually a super dielectric liquid in which the implosive capacitance of the body can implode more efficiently and therefore navigate. So again,
well, in the ships where Matt and I worked, we were not in a liquid.
Yeah.
We were on. I was on the ship, and he was in navigation.
Go ahead, Matt.
The entire ship was immersed in a field.
Good.
And it's what caused that. What the physics y'all are referring to, and like what Penny mentioned, I understand the mechanics more than I understand the physics. And being self-taught, I might have gaps in my verbiage. But what you're describing, if someone were to be physically there, what they're going to physically experience is that phase conjugate compression is a frequency compression. And what's happening is you're changing your phase variance with this reality.
Well,
as that phase conjugation compresses, the frequency of the matter you are made up of isn't what other people might consider compressing. It's changing its phase variance to a higher density frequency region of the electromagnetic spectrum that we in this density of the spectrum that we are interacting with are not privy to.
Well, actually,
and when you phase into that,
yeah, that's great. But actually, we have a far more precise. I love it that you've come up with this descriptor, and it's very useful. But if I may humbly suggest,
we've done it.
Well, we believe it, and we're here to talk about the physics. And the physics is we actually know exactly what that frequency is. Frequency signature is PlanckFire.com, which is golden ratio integer exponents of Planck, which predicts the ability to conjugate, implode, And when you say it's not a parallel universe, it's very specific. The implosion enables you to embed in an array.
We're not talking about other universe. We're talking about this same universe.
No, but
This same universe, this same timeline. We're
what other people
we're
call
going to
other
the-
dimensions.
yeah,
It's other frequencies.
well,
Yeah.
that language is colorful, but it's not specific. We want to use more specific language. So the implosion that phase conjugation enables, that compression allows your body to radiate into the nodes of a coherent longitudinal interferometry array. And only the nodes in that array support your body as you propagate. So specifically, it was called the Ba from the Ka in Egypt, or the Kesjan body, or the rainbow light by Tibetans. But what it meant was that after the compression, if you survive the compression, which requires a very specific discipline called shareable thoughts, no anger, which is why I admire you guys for doing it. And believe me, I'm a lousy lucid dreamer, but I'm pretty good at teaching the physics. So the point is that once that implosion happens, your opportunity to where you can go is very, very limited by where are the longitudinal coherence nodes of that array, as in, for example, Korotkov proving that only the dodecacosa nodes of the Earth grid allow military quality telepathy. It also dramatically affects nuclear critical mass, as would have the Montauk chair, which is the physics of the Ark of the Covenant as well. So this ability to implode capacitively to inhabit a longitudinal array, for example, you can do this better at sunrise and sunset. You can do it better at where magnetic lines cross. Everything that supports embedding into the longitudinal array, and the ability then to control your thoughts, your feelings, your emotion enough to navigate in that array. That's the part of this where we admire you.
Well, what you're
ability-
getting at, that we're using technology. We don't have to worry about emotions. We don't have to worry about it being easier at sunrise and sunset. And we don't have to worry about nodes. When we phase shift into that higher density, we're literally sending matter phasing out of this density into what others are referring to as the astral realm. That's literally what we use as hyperspace.
Now, what you're failing to understand, Dan, is we are in a ship that has its own field around it that bypasses all that stuff you're talking about.
Right. We're using technology.
And I was basically emotion free because I had been through 5 years of mind fracture and the resulting dissociation. I can go emotion free with a click.
Yeah, and to see if you could teach a young person could do this without the perversity. But
we don't need to teach it. It's not taught. It's a technology that you are literally given an implant into your skull to link with the ship.
I'd like to disagree with that. When we teach people to do this, for example, at flameinmind.com, where with the brainwave signature, we teach kids.
You cannot teach someone to navigate without mind fracturing them.
No, actually,
it's not possible.
Actually,
they
may I give you an
keep
example,
trying.
Penny? No.
What you're teaching is people how to astral project.
Well, that's an
We're not astral projecting. We're sending physical matter.
Well, I'm going to give you an example by measurement, okay? So at flameinmind.com, at first with my brainwave technology, we taught, as Korotkov found, that golden ratio in EEG indicated the moment kids could see without their eyes. And by the way, is the beginning of clairvoyance from them, and teaches the physics of clairvoyance, which is penetrating into that longitudinal array. But then later, we used the same device with Jean-Charles Moyen, Elena Denon's friend, who teleports regularly.
I know him.
Yeah, so he teleports regularly with witnesses and comes back with sand between his toes. But he recognizes, for example, the reason he always went to the beach was because that's a longitudinal node. The point was, when we measured, we found that his same alpha to gamma golden ratio cascade coherence in his EEG was off the charts high amplitude, just in the moment before he could teleport. And moreover, he knows exactly what happened, because just before he would teleport, he would see where he was going from through one eye and where he was going to through the other eye. And we know the
That's
physics.
called bilocation.
Well,
Yeah.
but he didn't bilocate, he teleported massively and with witnesses repeatedly.
If you
But if I may
bilocate,
emphasize,
that's
I want to emphasize,
stage
wait, I
one
want to
of
emphasize-
teleportation.
but I wish to emphasize the physics of the principle of how that works.
You are wanting to tell us your theories and ignore our practical
No, I'm not
experience.
ignoring.
And our practical experience is why you had us on here.
Well, that's great. No, I'm not ignoring you. I'm
That
honoring you.
feels rude.
I'm loving you. I think it's wonderful, but I'm just giving you an example. When you said it's not teachable, we actually teach this by measurement in brainwaves because we know the physics. The physics is when your brainwaves implode with enough mass, then you can go through into the longitudinal array right at the center of the vortex, in this case, the pineal, actually. So that is an example of measured teaching of how to do this, and it didn't require fractionating. But now I'm listening to you. Please, I'm listening to you. Tell me.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason why I kind of gathered you is because, I think, we all have different experiences, particularly SSP people and their own experiences and their bleed through. And Dan, your experience, of course, you're a genius here. And it's, to me, why encouraged us to come together is to compare the star maps, compare the superluminal travel, perhaps look at even time core, why certain things, you were talking about the field, Matt, and how those fields pull in space rather than to push through space, right? Something like that. And I'm bringing it at a very.
I don't remember saying that.
I'm saying that things, that we can actually be pulled through space instead of pushing through it, right? Things like that, or having a field pull
a dielectric warp field, and insects create this too, just through sound vibrations.
That's right.
And they're creating a little atmospheric only sound vibration warp bubble where they're being pulled from the front, pushed from the rear. They're compressing space. What they're compressing is the direction of the medium we exist in that is creating a compression towards the center of the Earth, which is what gravity is.
We published, but we did.
They're changing its direction.
We published the frequencies measured of the B wings vibrating, triggering the implosive dielectric in the capacitance of their skeletons in the Grebennikov work at goldenmean.info/gravitypolitics.
And without any need of magnets or dielectrics, their compressions are altering magnetic fields. Which it proves the link between magnetism and gravity.
Well, but actually the physics has been well described. It's called the structural dielectric. It's called the cavity structure effect specifically. And what it is the B skeletons have evolved to being a super dielectric. And then the structure of the cavity within the skeleton, it makes these little heart shaped, which are capacitively implosive. And then they measured the frequency cascade of the resonance of the bee's wing, and you can see it at goldenmean.info/gravitypolitics, which is called a phase conjugate pump wave and obeys PlanckFire.com, my prediction of what frequencies enable that. So that capacitive implosion spits out a longitudinal wave directionally, and that's how they make gravity.
So are you measuring these dielectric waves when they are not flapping their wings at all?
No. First of all, dielectric wave is not a term that's usually used. The dielectric refers to the efficiency of capacitive charge distribution within the media of the sandwich of a capacitor. So dielectric is merely a name for the efficiency of charge.
When I use dielectric wave, I'm referring to the propagation of an asymmetrical field.
It is asymmetric, absolutely, because the pine cone implodes. I would agree, it's specifically asymmetric. That's what enables it to propel longitudinally. The point is that it is a
without its wings flapping, you're not detecting any measurements of dielectrics or magnetics.
Well,
this proves that it's through the compression of the atmosphere that it's existing in. Through the compression of those cones, the air through those cones is what's creating a magnetic field.
Well, they didn't call, you don't have, actually, the implosive capacitance projects a longitudinal wave directionally, and the magnetic component is not generally referred to. But that's a minor difference in language. That's fine. But what I would say was that primarily the measurements made use the beating of the wings, but it is also known in Grebenikoff's work, and you can see hundreds of pictures at the link I mentioned, that in that case, he used dead insect skeletons and there was no wing beating, and they also floated. And we also know why, because that implosive capacitance of the cavity structure effect can also be triggered by other phase conjugate pump waves, for example, the Schumann harmonic cascade, but that's another question. But I think we should go back to Penny here. Penny, here's what I'd like to chat. And I'm sorry if I was too pushy. Really, I didn't mean to be pushy, because I really admire you, Penny. I seriously do. But when you said you can't do this without having been fractionated as a kid, that's what I find troublesome, because we're saying, no, if you have access to serious bliss experience, you can do this without pain. So shall we chat about that, you think?
Well, my experience is from being a fractionated child in a military program and used over and over and over and over. And I was generation 2 of this program. And Matt, I believe, is generation 5 or 6. And we are finding that the new generations 8 through 10, who were not fractionated by the same methods, are unable to do it.
So our work is saying that if
your work is saying that it works here for doing by location. What I'm saying is they are unable to navigate a ship in space.
That's the question. That's the question. The theory would be
they're unable to interface with the technology designed to operate with specific brain architecture.
You could be right.
The chip is very similar to what Elon Musk's Neuralink is. It's basically the same technology, which annoys the crap out of me that he's injuring animals and people to reinvent the wheel.
I agree with you. I agree.
Now, that chip links you to the specific ship that you are flying.
Yeah, but
you can't fly another one with it. But it links you to the computer that runs that ship.
Yeah. Now,
and you become.
We do have
in my time, they had us drink Black Goo so that we were basically an AI attached to a computer, and we were accessing our psionic abilities through that AI.
Yeah, and the
and there was no emotion at all.
No,
the only emotion we were capable of was anger.
And you went through hell, dear, and we can't imagine how that hell is. And I respect the hell out of you, dear. I really do, for sure.
For sure.
We know that Black Goo is a super dielectric, and we have some idea of its function. But what we also know is that, I think
my camera just went out.
Oh, we can hear you though. We can hear you. What we also know is that many ET races, we claim to have communication with many through many friends, Maru and not just Elena, but many ET races also use direct telepathic control of ships made of organic material, even DNA material.
Yeah, maybe we could touch on that with Matt.
That is a possibility. But we humans are not at that point yet with our technological development.
And maybe that's the discrepancy here. That
the technology that we are working with is very disconnected from our consciousness, from our soul. Unlike others. What we're using, we're basically trying to mimic what our actual bodies are capable of, just like Victor Schellberger said, observe and copy nature, and we're mimicking it in an artificial way.
Right.
We are creating with the ships we use have one or more engines, which the engine is just a field generator, and then we use dielectric asymmetrical capacitors in different points of the ship to alter the geometry of that field, whether compress or expand at different points, causing it to move.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that's how we do that.
Right.
Dan, can I ask you, Dan?
When I started, we were using ships that were plasma generators, and they vented the plasma to the outside of the ship to create the field.
You know what?
Which is exactly
that
what the
tech-
B-2 Spirit bomber does in a linear fashion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
explosion.
They
Yeah.
are now using that original SSP technology in the here and now technologies. So what I'm saying is this actual technology is 60 years older than they're telling you it is.
Yeah.
So Penny, let me ask you,
Correct.
can I ask you, let me ask you all this then. Perhaps we're talking about a discrepancy between some artificial intelligence dominated star travel, and maybe what Dan's talking about, in my guesstimation, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, is more the biological intelligence, natural intelligence, using, of course, emotions and lucid dreaming, and how that's connected to the difference. Maybe that's where the differentiation here and some of the headbutting here is about. One is maybe AI dominated, hence Black Goo. And Dan, some of your work is what's capable in us. It's integrity. It's inside us biologically for millions and millions of years.
Yeah, that right. So that we need to evolve to a point where we have that internal control of our plasma
Yes,
explosion. That
exactly. Plasma, because we're talking about plasma, Dan, right? Either way, we're both right. We're both talking about plasma, but one is more, yeah.
The human body is designed to interact with its environment through a gravity manipulating effect. We are capable of this.
Absolutely.
I remember doing it in the programs. They call it telekinesis.
Yeah. Nice. That's what we're
I'm
gonna
actually, I've only recently in the last
bilocate.
few months,
Huh?
only in the last few months, I've resurfaced memories of how they taught me this, and I've been practicing it. I'm on the verge. I'm at the point where I can, I can project energy out of from my palms. I can physically feel objects at a distance from several feet away. I'm at the point where, maybe in the next few months, I'll be able to push them.
Well, and so
But that
at
is
this
a gravity manipulation.
sure, absolutely.
But at this point, I cannot manipulate objects at a distance like I did in the programs. But in the programs, I had the AI Black Goo, and I was chipped to the ship's computer. And by the way, it was a quantum computer, but used human neurons in the relays.
Yeah, messy.
So
But
I know in Montauk, before I had ever experienced Black Goo, I was developing telekinetic abilities.
that's great. So very talented. It's great. So what we're suggesting here is the path by which humans get there naturally and using bliss instead of horrible perversity. And I'd like to give an example.
There was no bliss going on in
No.
Montauk, but
that's
we were
exactly the
developing
point.
the same
There's no
things.
bliss at
That's the
Langley.
difference.
Yeah. So that's maybe we need to highlight the differences here.
Yes.
So
Let's distinguish that.
yeah. So the phiray.com, which is now the extension of what was Therafi, when we light up a phase conjugate plasma field, we repeatedly have people see and feel things at a distance. And also we do healing at a distance regularly. And we don't call that a mystery. We teach the physics of how and why that works, embedding in the longitudinal array, the frequency signature, and why you can see that other node, et cetera, et cetera. So we can set up a phase conjugate plasma to do these things, and we actually do it every day. You could check at phiray.com. So getting people, and by the way, that is tremendously bliss inducing, and the bliss we induce is directly and specifically only from an amplified Schumann cascade, the same brain waves that John Charles used to teleport and bilocate. So that is the perfect phase conjugate pump wave for this planet, actually.
Interesting.
We were taught a little differently in the programs as to what is causing this. I think it was simplified more for us. What we were explained is it's a delta wave.
Well,
You start out in a single-minded focus, which develops gamma waves. But in that single-minded focus, the subconscious knows what you're intending. It knows what you need it
nice.
to do. So it will actually for a brief moment, push out a lower frequency wave, which allows you to pump more force through, and it raises the amplitude of that singular wave.
Nice.
And eventually it'll reach the point of pushing out a delta wave. And when you're pushing out a delta wave, objects are moving.
Well, let's be more specific here. So thank you. So to be clear, just so people aren't confused, what you refer to as gamma is not radioactive gamma. It's gamma EEG.
No, the gamma wave, gamma brain wave region,
which is what I'm about to say. So
which is above 40 hertz.
Yeah. And the ability to, but what gets you there is a cascade, which is sometimes called deca-delta, which was Preston Nichols' name for it. But actually, the delta is characterized by a very specific kind of phase conjugation, which is optimized by golden ratio, which is fractality phase conjugation perfected and implosion perfected, as proven by PlanckFire.com, which is the equation we use for all of our phase conjugate plasma devices, which are negentropic and healing. And many of those people do healing at a distance very successfully using the physics. It's not a mystery. So but I have to admit, let me just give you my personal example here. 30 years of intense Kundalini, I can make the frequency delta really powerfully, and it's fun. And my cascade goes up alpha to beta, but I don't get to gamma very good at all, actually, which means the low frequencies enable me to hear. I can hear ancestor memory quite often, clairvoyance. I'm sorry, clairaudience, but I get very little clairvoyance because I'm so lousy at getting to gamma. But a lot of people that I measure teach me what that means, which is parallel to what you're saying, actually. And it is a
gamma is really when you're doing a single-minded focus. Yeah. Beta, you're only in beta. The parts of the brain that are operating in beta is when you're thinking about the future, the past, you're contemplating, planning.
But the power is the ratio between them. So I can make 5 harmonics in golden ratio, very intense bliss, and you can feel negative ion wind from my pineal, and I become very clairaudient. And this is enhanced in phase conjugate plasma fields, Theraphi and Phi ray. And so
you are only able to do this when you are in bliss. You are not able to do this in any other emotional state.
If you're not able to do it in fight or flight situations, you will not be able to use it as a defensive weapon.
True. That's true.
And we are taught how to do it in fight or flight situations. Because we are weapons. We are weapons, and we have to use our abilities in weapon situations.
Yeah.
And I have used my abilities in fight or flight situations. I was attacked in my sleep 8 nights ago, and I defended myself using bilocation, and because I physically manifested at the second location as well as in my bed, I was able to stop the attack.
Wow.
And that
I have strangled people astral projecting.
Yeah.
People astral projecting into my local environment, I have strangled them, and then they come back like on Messenger or something. What the fuck was that?
But so
this is what we were trained for.
Yeah, beautiful, powerful. And
so what we're saying is that the bliss is not necessary.
Well, maybe this is another way of looking at it. I mean, bliss is essentially only a name for biologic charge radiance, which is the result of successful compression. Now
Well, you never defined that. You just went on with bliss, like New Age term.
I've been defining bliss for 50 years, dear. I'm the first.
Not to me.
Yeah, that's my special.
Yeah, but this is what we're talking about, this differentiation of how these resources are used, one from the heart and one from like a yin-yang phase, one from a dark place and one from a very light phase.
Well, they're all coming from the heart field. It's just...
Is that true? You know, but if one is taken against their will and tortured, that destroys it would destroy one's heart, no?
Probably.
No.
Yeah, I mean,
it destroys your mind. It doesn't destroy your heart.
It destroys your mind. Your heart is where the field that you're using to manipulate things or to sense things, both passive and active psionics, are coming from the field that your body is creating. And what we're not talking about an emotional side of things, an internal side. We're talking about the physical heart is creating this wave, and all gamma waves actually start in the heart and travel through a wave through the densest neural nerve that exists between the physical organic heart and your brain. Any
vagus.
gamma starts at your physical heart
Oh, fascinating.
and travels up that nerve into your brain, and it's the thickest, densest nerve in your entire body.
Actually, you know, we pioneered the measurement of the connection between the EKG and EEG. I did that work with Bentoff's capacitive accelerometer.
Well, in the
Let me finish,
70s,
please.
I had an
I'd like to hear about
EEG
that.
Yeah, so
that
Penny,
taught
Penny, just one moment, Penny, please. So what we measured was the EKG's phase lock with the brain liquids, and the phonon, you're right, the phonon was pumped to the brain with the sacrocranial liquids delivered through the amygdala, and then that would implode by the foci of the ventricle liquid, which gets horny, which is actually sexual juice, you know, conserved. So
Which is where sex magic comes from.
yeah, well, it is.
Right.
And-
Yeah.
but in one sense, I would agree that, you know, part of that comes to the nerve, but the major part that we measured coming through the liquid phonon of the sacrocranial liquid. And it's true, the highest frequency of EKG spectrum, and by the way, I'm probably the most experienced person in EKG spectrum analysis of emotion on the planet. I can tell you for sure that the EKG power spectra reaches up to the 40s, the gamma ray, when you get heart coherence. And so that does tend to deliver some gamma. So, but the delivery mechanism most was liquid.
It is possible to achieve that heart coherence without emotions.
Well,
You could be in a disassociation and create that gamma wave coherence between the heart and the brain, and which increases the amplitude of that field.
well, remember, I am credited in the medical literature for inventing the word heart coherence because I'm the first to measure it. And I can tell you for sure that the second order power spectrum of the EKG, which is called the cepstrum, and the amplitude of that peak is a functional lie detector and measures kinesiology for a very specific reason. It's called pure intention. It's literally ability to achieve charge radiance by being a shareable wave. So if you speak your intent with pure intent,
Authenticity does not require love.
well, no, what we're saying is that we know that what we call pure intention, a shareable wave, produces heart coherence, since I defined the measurement of heart coherence in the literature, and we know that is a functional lie detector. And it's true that if you are lying, you almost cannot produce heart coherence. I can just say
It's been proven, and I'm sure you're aware of this. You were probably part of that. It's been proven through research, through testing, that people who are acting in an authentic manner, their biofield is 50,000 times greater amplitude put out than anyone else. 50,000 times greater.
Yeah.
But you don't need to love everybody and
right.
be love and light for that to happen. You just need to be authentic with yourself.
And it's interesting that will then define your ability to implode successfully in order to lucid dream or die successfully, specifically. That's what enables you to be compressible. So for example, if you're feeling anger, you will not succeed because it's not compressible. Actually, anger is the 1/7 wave shape from Centics. We know why anger is not compressible. So it's fatal to try to do anger at death.
Penny, can we get you on video?
Is your video working yet, Penny?
I think we lost Penny. Oh dear. I didn't
Penny?
mean to cut. I apologize, Penny. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to finish my thing. Go ahead.
I can't get my camera to come back on without totally rebooting. So
I know this happened last time, the other day when we were on with
yes,
Dan.
I'm gonna have to buy a new camera again.
Oh, that sucks.
This is my fourth one.
Oh dear. Yeah. Well,
Are we dealing with the same situation that you deal with every time you try to buy a phone?
Yes.
oh dear.
Penny's electrical field shorts things out. She'll explode breakers.
He's psychokinetic, which is
So let me ask you
Yes.
something. I would like, can I submit something? So
Go ahead.
perhaps a little bit of the combativeness here in this, we're debating back and forth, and I enjoy it really. I think it's healthy for all of us. Is that maybe Matt and Penny can talk about this, and we can bring it back to you, Dan. Is Matt, I know that you and Penny have, at least I know Penny, I shouldn't speak for you, Matt, is that Penny has some DNA, Draco DNA. And Matt, is it fair to say that you've been, I know you were raised with them partly, but
Yes.
is it fair? Yeah. So maybe that's some of some of the debating here.
Some of the elite families have been in shock that I've been able to accidentally fall into what I have called the elite families telepathic network. They have their own internet on a psychic level.
It's
And I've
called
fallen
the
into it.
telepathic internet. Call it what
And
it is.
I didn't know it has its own name. I fell into it and everybody was in shock because I shouldn't. I'm B positive.
I'm O positive, and I showed up in the
I have
telepathic internet, and I was interviewed to replace a certain person who's going to be taken out. And they said I met all of the criteria except I was O positive and that I actually cared about the people of his country. So
they believe people with positive RH factor are weaker than negative, which what they're getting at is
they're a different species and they even eat us.
Yes. And who taught them that? The Jahami taught them that.
The Jahami, aka what everybody else calls Anunnaki. This has been ongoing since the Anunnaki were here and they left.
They are the descendants of the giants. Our kings and queen bloodlines are the descendants of the giants, who are the survivors of the fall of Atlantis. They are the Atlanteans.
Yes, we know the history pretty well through Elena and Anton Parks. But interestingly,
I haven't been able to find Anton Parks in English.
Always, there's 2 books in English.
I don't even know who that is.
Fractalfield.com/Zeitlin, Zeitlin, the whole story. But just to pursue that thought about the Anakh family, only half the family, Yahweh and Lil U, was Draco, and he was only half Draco. But that family,
that's where the reptilian parts of our DNA come in. But we've had augmentations.
But Enki looked like a frog. But Penny,
shush a minute, just a minute.
Okay. All right.
We had CRISPR tech used on us to insert specific DNA that allowed us to become navigators.
Which is very interesting, and that's the principle. Well, the question
specifically draconian. So we have more draconian DNA than the average person.
And if you believe, Elena, right now that the Draco homeworld Thuban has been completely surrounded by the Thuban, the Negomon.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
That's a big lie. What's been going on is a race called the Matra have invaded this galaxy from the Andromeda galaxy.
That's old.
And the Thubans and the Orions had to unite to get rid of them the first time they were here. And now we are asking for the Guardians, who are the military police of the core galaxy civilization. We are asking their assistance to stop the invasion. Because the Matra are the nastiest things I have ever encountered in space.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Sure. But so then you're specifically saying that Penny, that Elena Danaan is wrong, that the Federation has not.
Yes.
The butt of the. Well,
I am completely. I have not heard a single thing from her mouth that agreed with my experiences in space.
I'm very.
I will be blunt about it.
But see, this is what I suspected. I'm actually happy to hear you discuss this. I'm working now with the Swaru Marie perspective and Astral Urmah, who does the astral battles for the.
I don't know any of those people. I'm an alchemist. I am not a New Age person. I do not follow New Age people. I do not follow channelers.
No.
Channelers are listening to V2K, which is the CIA.
I'm speaking about Astral Urmah, who is an Urmah shaman who's able to take on the astral battles of the Federation, who are saying that Elena is wrong. I suggest you look at Swaru Official for some of that. But what we're saying is that, yes, it's kind of Federation propaganda that Elena is spreading, unfortunately. And so
It's CIA propaganda.
well, you see, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what you're getting at, Federation
yeah,
propaganda. It's look, if you're a channeler and you're not wearing a V2K an RF shielding cap, you are too compromised to be able, and you can't tell the difference between V2K and an actual telepathic communication.
Elena said she has a chip. Now, this is a complicated story. I don't think we're not in a position to
A
do
chip can be shielded by a RF cap.
Interesting. So, but
Wear the RF cap, and I might listen to what you have to say. If you're not wearing one, I don't want to hear it because it's straight from the CIA.
yeah, well,
If you put RF
cap on it.
shielding metal over your head
Yeah.
and the voices stop, it's V2K. If
Yeah.
they continue,
Yes.
it's actual telepathy.
well, but and I think that's a separate conversation. But I want to go back to a question I wanted to ask Penny. Penny, so when we did with the SSP guy who met the Draco White Queen, what was his name, Alex? Anyway, he said that the Siakar Royal Draco would not allow themselves to be
The Siakar are not
wait.
Draco.
Well, the Siakar are the advanced, according to, but
No,
No. The Siakar are a far older race.
they're older, yes,
The
but they're
They
Siakar
the Siakar seeded all the other reptilian races in this galaxy. They are they are older than almost every other species in this galaxy.
The Siakar are from 12D, and they are what the Gnostics called the Aeons.
nice.
The Bible calls them seraphim.
Yeah,
they are not Draco.
What's so wonderful, so all I'm saying is, they didn't let me finish my question. They said the Siakar would not permit themselves to be infected with the Black Goo, but the lineage of Draco would. That's
That's true.
Siakar can't be infested because Black Goo is a 3D physical thing.
Well,
it can't move between densities.
It's a super.
Yeah, but what I wanted to ask all of you is if we're talking about the seraphim and the other races, Dan, the angelic races, this is going to be another higher dimension of propagation, and so there's certain things that are not, I guess, permeable there.
Well, you could think of them as the winged dragons. Which another way.
They are winged dragons.
That's what the Siakar. When they get older, their spines never stop growing. Their torsos, that part of them never stops growing as they age, but their limbs and wings don't grow. As they age at a certain point, they fall off at some point. So do their limbs. At first their back limbs, then their forelimbs, and then their wings. And eventually, but they're so telepathic, they're so psionic,
yes,
that they actually don't need technology at all.
I agree, absolutely. And in fact, but when you have a mind meld with the Siakar, it feels like a vice. but
yes, I'm well aware.
Yeah, but I love talking to you guys because you guys have the experience. But now, if I may humbly ask, now I did about 6 or 7 interviews with Elena Denon, and I'm tending to agree with you, unfortunately, that she's ignored, for example, the Tegotan Pleiadian Swaro information, who are saying the Federation is not all the heroes. So Penny and Matt, what would you say to the people who've been following Elena Denon, who's convinced them that the Federation is the heroes?
She's been.
I didn't hear anything anyone just said. I was either
you blanked,
frozen, or y'all were either I blinked or y'all blinked.
Elena is telling everyone that the Federation is the heroes and they're saving us from the Dracos. And what would you advise people who have been apparently misled?
Okay. The 2 reptilian empires in this galaxy, the Thubans and the Orions, saved your asses from a Matra invasion. How does that make them the bad guys?
Yeah. So the Drake, and that's also what other have told us. So
yeah,
the
Germans in space that we both served with.
Yeah.
are just trying to escape genocide on Earth.
The dark
And
fleet.
that can be proven if you look through the last 3,000 years of history. Every couple of hundred years, somebody from the Roman culture will try to wipe them all out. Every 200 to 300 years. First it was Julius Caesar, then it was the guys after him, and then it was the Vatican. And when the Inquisition went through, they killed the women and left them with thousands of square miles with no women at all. And then it was the English, and then it was the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why they left Earth.
The Germans.
The Germans.
Mm-hmm.
They're not out there trying to bother anybody.
They wanted away from all the genocide. That's
They
all
just
it is.
wanted away from the people who were trying to kill them, and they're out there living their own lives in peace. And the Americans are pursuing them, taking World War II back to people that have been in space for 400 years with time travel.
Yeah, well, then they were very good at time travel. But the gossip that we've been told from Elena is that after the Federation kicked them out of the solar system, they went to Aldebaran. Is that true of the Dark Fleet?
Germans are still in the solar system.
Oh, yeah, the Dark Fleet?
Yes.
Nacht
The
Waffen?
Germans still have bases
The
on
dark
Ceres, on Mars, on
They're still there.
They're still there.
Because Elena is swearing they're gone.
She's
the word
listening
dark
to
fleet
the
is a
CIA.
derogatory term.
Yes.
Yeah, the dark. Yeah.
The term dark fleet is a derogatory term that was developed by the ICC. The ICC is the space program developed by the very people the Germans have been running from.
Yeah,
Yes.
They are the bankers.
Yeah,
And they are the people who control the V2K. And if you're listening, if you're channeling without an RF blocker, that's who you're listening to.
Yeah, but then what would you say about Tony Rodriguez, who spent his 20 years with Nacht Waffen, and yet he's siding
On Ceres.
Yeah. Is Tony misled about the Dark Fleet?
Tony was.
What does he say about it? Because I don't stay in the know.
He studied their propulsion technology. I've interviewed him about it. We've done quite a bit of work together, but I think he's been misled in part with Elena's issues.
He has an infatuation with Elena.
Well, I don't know.
You mean the powers of seduction, my dear?
Well, I don't want to be judgmental. I like Tony's.
I'm not being
no.
judgmental. I like Tony a lot.
Yeah, I like Tony too.
Tony's one of my besties in the community, and I've tried really hard to not talk about this, but you guys brought it up. He has an infatuation with Elena Denon, but she's completely full of shit.
So Penny, let's bring this back. I would like you had mentioned the Germans have they have space travel, time travel. So maybe we can keep personalities.
If you have a hyperspace drive, you have time travel.
Yeah.
You step into
they're one and the same thing. They come together.
I agree.
If you once you step into that time stream, you can step out at any time in space or time that you so desire.
It's so easy. They had to add locks into the computers to control the field in a way so people don't do it accidentally.
Yeah, we're having some of the same issues with our tech, actually. You understand plonfire.com, implosion, phase conjugation. You got the same issue.
So let me ask you this. So if we're talking about time travel in terms of the technical abilities to do so, and then Dan, you had mentioned it through Dan, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Time Lords, because you had mentioned that in some of your videos too.
Time Lords are real.
Yeah, I think so too. And this was
I know so.
Great. Well,
Sean Bonnet and I both have alters who work in them.
Nice, nice, and I honor that. What my background here, William Bueller, Templar Agenda: The Repair of the Fabric of Time, who basically talked to
Yes.
Thoth. He talked
Yes.
to Thoth every day, basically, and Thoth is saying, things like Montauk ripped up the fabric of time. That's how we got
Yes, they did.
parasites. Yeah, so the reason we got
The
parasites.
Project Phoenix simply destroyed the timeline
Yeah,
fabric.
that's right.
Not just ours, but screwed with all of the splits coming off of it. And they're
And Penny, would
splits.
you
They're not.
say, would you say that's why we have such confusion and such chaos down here? Because I felt that too. It's because Project Phoenix had disrupted so much of our
Fractionated
local
time.
time space.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
confusion
We have
is coming
we have
because of
the Mandela effect, because in 2012 there were 22 timeline splits that were destroyed by different kinds of events. Some were nuclear wars, some were space rocks, some were bioweapons, some were volcanic things. But all of them were destroyed. And the Time Lords, the Time Corps, we call it, like
Time
Marine
Corps,
Corps, we went through, we pinched off the ends of those splits that were dead, and we plugged them back into the nearest healthy time split.
Nice. Makes sense.
And so every single variant was real in the timeline split that it was part of. And we were only able to combine them because they were just splits like a river delta.
Yeah. And this was what Thoth called
So where does that leave us?
Well, the repair of
The
the
fabric of time, yes. Yes,
that
beautiful.
was a very blunt instrument. A lot of people in each timeline split didn't make it. And I've been contacted by people who figured out that I was one of the people responsible, and I have been called every nasty name in the book because I tried to save lives and didn't get everybody.
Yeah, wow.
It's a very blunt instrument when you're the layer above the timeline looking down at this river delta and you're seeing mess after mess after mess after mess, and you're trying to merge them.
And you know how the big fractal has to look in order to be repaired. It has to be implosive, otherwise.
We were trying our best to save all those life forms. And that's part of why you're seeing extinct animals reappear, is because they weren't extinct in some of those other splits.
I think it would be helpful for our audience that the physics be explained a bit here. Remember that time is only a name for the experience of relative spin rate. And spin rate, of course, accelerates when you accelerate a toroid. So the reason acceleration causes an increase in aging is simple. It accelerates the experience of spin density. And so what we're talking about here actually is that these corridors on which, in this longitudinal array, in which, for example, intense emotion propagates, those corridors actually have to branch according to very specific fractal rules. Otherwise, it's not centripetal anymore. And then you have this fractionation of the timelines, which is very serious. And that's why you have Time Lords, which many have talked about with other language, but I totally agree.
And that's why we have complete rules about what you are and are not allowed to do if you time travel. You are not allowed to screw with the time.
And it can't be fractionating to the soul, actually. Too much time. Very dangerous.
This is why in the contracts, when we get abducted, in the contracts of us being sold off and being used, they are required to bring us back. Age regress us using technology, bring us back in time, and put us back in our beds.
But because they
moments from when they took us.
Because they CRISPR'd us, they think they own us outright. And my handler has actually told me that they own me like a truck. They're going to use me anytime they damn well please. And that I have no say in the matter because I'm not a human being in their minds.
The bastards. The bastards.
And I'm 69 years old and still get taken for 60 and backs.
Oh, geez. Yeah, this is
And people wonder why I'm constantly exhausted.
and angry, and you should be angry.
Yes, I'm
You're right.
angry.
You should be angry.
The
I agree.
last time they showed up to take me, I told them I was not going to go, that the only way they would get me to go willingly again is if they fixed this body where I was no longer medication dependent and in pain. They don't have to make me younger, just stop hurting and stop having to take meds.
Yeah.
Because
And it's all of this.
I'm in endocrine shutdown because of what I've added up that I remember. I'm over 5,000 years old in this body.
What
I'm
they
doing
did
pretty
to
good for
me,
that.
Well,
what they did to me is why, why I'm bringing this up. I just had a conversation with family members only last night again as to why I don't like being touched and why I have a knee-jerk reaction when people touch me. It's because of what they did to me. To
Yeah.
create the alters, what they did to mind fracture me and create alternate personalities. And the primary reason for creating alternate personalities is simply to get more use out of their tools.
Oh, yeah.
Well, secondly, to cover their crimes.
Yeah. Well,
If
Yes.
we're in an altar, our cover person here can't testify against them.
Yeah.
Except we started remembering. Actually, my memories were activated by an NSA agent in 2013. He used my remember code, and the way he acted, I know he thought he was activating that altar, but instead he activated that altar's memories, and it took me 3 years to figure out what I was remembering.
Oh, yeah.
So during that 3 years, I almost had myself committed because I thought I was insane. And somewhere along the line, I got enough peace to figure out what I was remembering, where it was, and what I did, and who did it to me. I thought it was the CIA who did it to me until I ran across Doris Neely, former CIA archivist, and she told me that my packet that she described as being 5 inches thick came from the OSS in 1985. So the OSS never was disbanded. It just went underground.
Which is
Right.
the Germans again, basically.
And that's who was operating the underground research facility on kids in Camp Hero in Montauk.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Yeah. But now that my friend, who was at Montauk, well, I knew Duncan, I knew all those people. But
Well, I know a lot of the survivors, most of whom are no longer public because they got closure
but they said that
2 years ago.
there was a
That
Draco.
same Doris Neely confirmed live on radio to me that I was one of those kids,
Yeah.
along with several other of us.
Well, there were
And yet
12
I was
others
born
although-
in '86. So
Right,
I've been.
right.
She also freaked out when she first saw me, and we're talking live on radio. She's like, "Do you remember me? We worked together in the '70s."
Yeah, it turns out that Matt and I both had alters working out of the DC CIA office with her. My alter was killed in a plane crash.
Wow.
So Matt, let's talk about that if we can. So if you were born in '87 and she remembers you from 10 years
86,
before, '86, and she remembers you from whatever 10 years prior,
as a grown man.
right? So can we share a little bit about the time dilation technology and how that's used? And
All it is, it's the same it's the same field generator. You go in a spaceship. It's the same field generator that you use to manipulate gravity. All you're doing is you're spinning it up. What it is you spin it up just enough, and the effect that outside gravity has on the object, the ability to transfer the effect of mass and inertia through that field starts to go down. as you spin the field up. And as you ramp it up and add amplitude, as you pulse
It's
the field.
the phase
And
conjugate.
it's not a frequency issue. It's a rate of phase change from
Duration.
open to closed circuit.
Great.
Which is golden.
From closed to from open to closed circuit, it is the phase change rate. The shorter the rate, the higher the amplitude spike that the whole field experiences, and combined with its field spin, as you bring that up, the effect of gravity on the object inside the field goes down. When you reach absolute zero effect, you literally phase out of this density and are in hyperspace. And in hyperspace is where the Eldritch went to.
Yeah.
And lost a lot of people because they didn't have a proper field protection.
Actually, many of them went to the bar they were dreaming of going to, and we know why. But that
there are stories of some people on the Eldritch, they were watching themselves disappear, and then when they visualized their relation to their surroundings, they had to hold that in their mind.
That's right.
Because now that's what the navigator does.
Exactly. Nice.
That's
For the crew.
That's
For the
our
crew.
job.
Does that for the entire crew.
Exactly.
That's our job there.
Beautiful.
Is
And
to go
that is the
into
ability-
hyperspace and
Yeah.
come out with nobody in the walls or the floors.
That's right. And the ability to do
Penny,
that.
Penny, are we talking about the astral paths then?
Well, astral is a name for the array of the longitudinal nodes, and that's the point I wanted to make. That when you said
Hyperspace.
that's
just what we call it.
Astropathics,
You
astropathics, yeah.
Remember, you need to be centripetal in order to inhabit the array. So your ability to steer the array is directly electrically how centripetal you are. And the only way to be centripetal is phase conjugate charge collapse tuned to Planck, named PlanckFire.com. That's why that is the brainwave recipe that does it, actually.
Well,
And we don't need to know all of that as navigators. All we need to know is we have to telepathically link with every crew member. We have to telepathically be remote viewingly aware of the entire ship. And for the rest of the crew, we have to do the same thing that guy on the Eldritch did, and pay attention to the relationship of the crew to the craft. We're doing that and adding that into the artificial field that's being generated by the engine.
The centripetal
through our connection to the
Yeah.
ship.
Yeah, and
let
you know
me
what?
interrupt a minute.
We're acting as that antenna for the ship.
Nice.
Let
nice.
me interrupt just
Go
a
ahead,
minute.
Penny. Go ahead, Penny.
Tony Rodriguez talked about that when he was a slave and he was in the area where they had storage, that when they would come out of hyperspace, there would be like 5 to 10 minutes that they had to stand still, and he didn't know why.
Yeah, good.
That's
They
why.
have to stand still so the
Nice.
navigator can make sure they're not inside a physical object.
Good work. Exactly. And that's the
Right.
Good. Nice.
The navigator has to scan everybody, and it's a protocol. Navigator runs through his protocol, scans everybody, makes sure that the relationship between the ship and the crew is all good, then disconnects from the crew telepathically.
There he is.
And then everybody can start moving and go
Nice.
on about their business.
And it's not always one ship. The last tour that Matt and I did together that we have recall of, we were running an armada.
In an
of
armada.
Really?
20 ships.
Wow. Yeah. And you had to navigate together. But I think
We had to be the navigator and do that for 20 ships. For each of our shifts, and we each did a shift.
Yeah, we
Wow.
each did a shift.
We had to maintain that for 12 hours.
I love this.
And I would be on the bridge and he would be in navigation because he didn't like our captain.
But
Well, frankly, I didn't like our captain either, but the human that he is on Earth is a really nice man.
Well, that's but Penny, could we
One of my best friends here on Earth.
a moment for the physics here,
Really?
okay?
Me?
So that when the time empath at Montauk told me that there was a nasty Draco that Charlie trying to run Montauk, and that the reason they needed teenagers to steer the time chair, who are basically obviously lucid dreamers, illustrates the principle here, which is that ability to have that centripetal focus, which is electrically measurable now. We know how to measure how centripetal you are, which tells us if you're a navigator, actually. And one other point I wanted to make was that the reason Johnny von Neumann went crazy after Philadelphia Montauk, he didn't know how to link the generator on the right versus the left side of the ship to phase conjugate accurately. He didn't actually understand the physics. And Tesla told him to go to hell because he didn't want nothing to do with it, because he knew that von Neumann didn't understand physics.
My understanding of the Eldridge is that they had a hyperspace drive and didn't know what it was.
No, it was
And
they had two generators opposite sides of the chip, and they were trying to achieve simply magnetic invisibility, and they didn't understand phase conjugation accurately. They didn't understand.
Right.
They didn't understand crap.
They also didn't understand that they needed a navigator to operate it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
A modern
Interesting.
day analog to what they were experiencing. Just research the Hutchison effect.
Yeah. Well, that,
Mhm.
but he was relatively uncontrollable. Also, I mean, there was no steering. That's the problem. There's the problem again. Who's going to be the steerer? I love it that you.
The
Exactly.
navigator.
Yeah.
That's
The
what
navigator in conjunction with the computer, because the computer does the math, the computer does the physics, and we do the psionic ability that it uses to pull it off.
So Penny, let
that's
me ask you
another
this.
reason why that's another reason why we were genetically augmented with draconian DNA is because of the technology we were using to do this what we were getting from ETs and required their genetic code to interface with it. It was like a lock.
And no
Until
Bliss.
we could backwards engineer it, we were using the original stuff we were getting from them, and at first we were leasing the services of ET contractors to navigate our ships for us through hyperspace. Then we figured out how to genetically alter ourselves, and we started doing this to our kids.
I have been on ships where my co-navigators were ETs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing
and that's
about
why.
one thing about having the CRISPR chip part of the CRISPR, that one specific area of DNA, it allows me to be in a room with a full Draco and not have my brain fry. Because most humans are not hardwired for that.
When they figured out that the kids they were augmenting with draconian DNA could actually mediate for them with the draconians, and they didn't have to go into the room with them, because a normal human will only last about 30 minutes before their brain becomes complete liquid.
And Kundalini is contagious in a similar way, actually. But Alex, you had a question.
Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Oh, no. So I was just asking in terms, you just answered the question. I was going to ask you how important was the certain DNA boson 7 frequency in terms of navigating ships on the human end, but you just said, that you needed to be hybridized, especially for the certain ships.
Having studied this,
it's because of the technology is ET based on their neural architecture. People who are augmented can interface with it better than normal humans.
When we did microwave spectrum analysis to measure DNA and spine emissions, I think we figured out what boson 7 actually meant, that when you power spectrum analyze DNA emissions in the microwave, the superposed phase coherence of the recursive braiding shows up in the power spectrum as a log function of 7. Essentially means, is the DNA implosive, and therefore can it navigate? Boson 7 or microchloridians in the blood meaning about the same thing. which is implosive DNA, which is a recursive braiding, which we now know we have measured recursive implosive braiding in DNA responding measurably to human bliss. The power spectrum of the EKG predicts the braid density, and we know why, because it's the enzyme responsible for the zipper. It's a phonon coherence that implodes the DNA in that regard. And
Wow.
Well,
Well, what we learned
photon
from
coherence-
draconians.
The photon
Sorry.
coherence comes from the Jahami DNA.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's why O negatives are psionically. They develop faster, basically psionically.
But isn't O negative? Isn't that the general donator here on Earth? Is that the universal?
Yeah, the
universal donator.
Now,
Yeah.
what you need to know is that in my generation, this CRISPR tech only produced a live child if the mother was O negative and the child was O positive.
Fascinating.
So you will
Fascinating.
find that most of the original navigators, my generation, Misha Johnston's generation, that we all have O positive. By the time you get to Matt, he's
What
able
they
to be
figured
beta.
out with my generation is, by the time they reached my generation, what they figured out is that as long as you've got a dormant little O in your DNA architecture, you can develop. You won't develop as fast, but you can develop as strong.
But I'd like to ask just a question. So the time empath at Montauk told me that the Draco Charlie needed the human teenagers because the Draco Charlie couldn't steer the time chair himself.
The chair,
Not-
first off, the chair is not draconian technology.
No.
They
Yeah,
were
right.
they
It's
were
Zeta.
there. It's Zeta. They were there investigating that technology as well. But the reason they need children is because children do not, they needed specific brainwave patterns.
Yeah.
Children
Yes.
have not developed beta waves yet. They need children to be awake, lucid, and active in the lower frequencies of theta and alpha, and that's where children operate in.
Yes. And
They haven't, their brains have not developed beta waves yet.
And they can
Right,
be, they can be more easily taught clairvoyance for that reason also.
Right.
For
right,
that
right.
very reason, because their
I
brains are
was-
already wired for it.
Yeah.
And if you don't use it, you lose it. As you grow and develop into your beta brain waves, the brain is pruning those synapses
Exactly.
that would have made it easier. And that's
And-
why it's
but
more
you see,
difficult. It's
the
not
point is-
impossible
Now, I
for
was
an adult to
told,
develop, but it's
Yeah.
just more difficult.
But when you can make that
I was
cascade,
told
when you
that
can get
when
that cascade,
in
you
the
do get leverage. The cascade is what makes the vortex in your synapses implode, and that's what gives you centripetal leverage. So once you understand
Well, first you have to reconnect those synapses.
that, well,
You
need
have to
learn.
regrow those, and that happens through visualization.
Well, actually, the way they
Now,
taught
what
it in
I
St.
was told back in the day was that they had originally tried this technology on adults and that they had gone stark raving, irredeemably insane.
Yeah, but
And that children had not yet formed a concept of what reality is.
but
Right,
Mike,
right,
I'd like
that's
to make
right.
one little point here.
But
that in St.
that's
Petersburg-
why they couldn't have beta waves, because it's the beta wave regions, it's the parts of the brain that operate in beta waves that gives you the concept,
That's
a
logic.
greater concept
That's
of your
logical.
reality, of your past, your future. Children who haven't developed beta waves are thinking in the moment only.
Yeah, they're in the present. But if
Right,
I make one
right,
point
right,
here,
right,
in St. Petersburg, when they were teaching kids to see without their eyes and therefore be clairvoyant, and then Korotkov proved by measurement it was a golden ratio cascade alpha to gamma. The way they taught the kids to get ready for that state of mind was, imagine yourself in beautiful nature, and then your body flips an electrical switch, you implode and get fractal.
Nice.
For
nice.
adults, in order to shut down the beta mind, you literally have to practice single-minded focus. There's two other ways of doing it.
Nice.
And it's actively paying attention to using a single-minded focused mind, actively paying attention to your breathing, which links your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, allowing you to calm down out of beta.
And
another way of doing that is actively visualizing, feeling your body, each muscle at a time, feel heavier and heavier, which relaxes you out of beta.
And
and lengthening the exhale, which by lengthening the exhale, we go more into parasympathetic.
Yes, but you know that
any form of paying attention to breathing, any form of paying attention to breathing, it's the attention that brings you out of beta.
The perfect breath is absolutely measurable, as we know. The perfect breath is well documented to 0.1 hertz, 10-second Mayer wave breath, the most important frequency in the blood pressure. And the reason is 0.1 hertz is actually golden ratio to Planck. So the 10-second breath, which is the only definition of heart coherence by heart math, actually is a phase conjugator. So that's why 5 second in, 5 second out is the introduction to the caduceus breathing, basically. So
I found that to not be necessary. It may make things easier. I don't know, but I have found it to not actually be necessary. I can enter the lower theta alpha waves just by paying attention to my breathing. I don't even have to be controlling it. As long as I'm aware of it and single-mindedly focusing on it, I am suddenly relaxing out of beta, through alpha and through theta.
Do you actually measure your brain waves?
No, I don't have an EEG machine, but I am I have the.
It works great.
I'm looking into it in a few months. I can't afford it right now.
I can help you.
I'm a truck driver.
I will set
that would be great. If you want to send one to me, that would be awesome. Because I physically feel the pressure. Because since I was a teenager, I have developed my tactile sense of touch connection to my energy, my chi. I physically feel what parts of my brain. Whatever I'm doing, I can point to where in my brain neurons are being activated, because I can physically feel the pressures. Nice. When I'm doing the telekinesis practice, I can point to you precisely where in my brain neurons are firing at an increasing rate.
Yeah, and that's the plasma density. That's the implosion. That's beautiful. It's a wonderful skill you have. So I think measuring your brainwaves would be a beautiful compliment to that, because it could.
I'd love to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's help you. Good. So flame in my. Now you're going to need iOS. You need an iPad or an iPhone or a Mac.
I don't do Apple. Sorry.
We're going to have to figure.
I'm not a fan.
We'll talk about that later. But
yeah.
Anyway,
I'm also a truck driver by trade. I'm cross country. I've literally only been home for a few days. I've been out for the past 8 months, and I'm leaving again tomorrow.
Oh dear. Well, thank you for your time today. This has been magical and beautiful and useful. Do we want to? We've been at it for an hour and a half, but do we want to do a summary closing thought? So the major story to the mori of today's conversation is, so you're saying Elena's wrong about the Federation? You're saying they're wrong about the German Dark Fleet? You know, some people need some serious re-education here.
Some people
I want to keep personalities out of it.
Yeah. Well,
some people need some serious re-education, but they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. And
I'm trying to write a book about why the Germans went into space.
Yeah.
And the source documents are in German, and I'm having trouble translating them.
Well, we'll get you some help here. That's a useful project. I appreciate it. Yeah. Very important.
So,
yes, we can.
I have found them in German as PDFs, so I've not had to pay a small fortune for them, thank God. But they're written by people who were part of the Nazi regime, but they documented the history leading up to the Nazi regime. And so once you filter out all of their,
Yes.
guys all froze.
Yeah, that's okay. We need that piece of the
I
What-
completely
what-
disconnected for a moment
yeah.
Okay,
We'll
by accident.
once you filter out all the propaganda and
Yeah.
just look at the history,
Yeah.
because that's what I'm trying to do, which means I have to read them and I have to think about it. Well, first I have to translate them and then I have to read it and I have to think about it and think about it and think about it. And these are like 800-page books in German.
Yeah, I have a German translator that will help you, Penny. I would love to try to help you because that's important work. Thank you. Good.
Okay.
And we're getting close
Yeah.
to the end of the story, so thank you for being.
Yeah, that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons that I've been shut down is because the powers that be don't want the German side of the story told.
Yeah.
And I'm not German. My grandmother was Jewish. You know, I don't have a horse in this race.
Good. And fine. And any final thought from you, Matt, then, or Matt and Alex, or like, should we still
Matt, are
talk
you still
about
there?
Bliss, or should we not talk about Bliss?
Well, I mean,
It's kind of irrelevant.
it feels good, but it's just not all that necessary. To achieve the desired end goal, there are many ways of achieving it.
But which is most ensouling?
Yeah.
Well, that
You mean,
depends.
what's
That
the most
depends.
fun?
Exactly. If you're
Right.
focused on if you're focused in your life on only the things that make you feel good, you're not going to develop any wisely.
But we're not talking about like feeling good, like just
No,
to,
Matt,
get off.
If you would look at physicsofsoul.com, please. The physics of soul is when you can consistently, implosively braid it and make your DNA centripetal, and then your aura radiates in the longitudinal, which is specifically and measurably how you lucid dream, and
Well,
therefore how you take something through death. That is
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I
But we're
have
talking about
I have been dead 11 times in the here and now, and I have come back. I've gone a different place
Penny has a
every
soul.
time. I'm still me.
We believe it, Penny. That's why
And
we admire you.
I've astral projected quite a few times at this
In
point.
fact, that's why they
and
needed you, because you had a soul. This is good.
yes, exactly, Dan.
You
exactly.
you cannot not have a soul and be alive. Like literally, if you're breathing,
Exactly.
you have a soul.
Well,
If you're running
beings,
a meat
if
suit,
you
you
think
have a soul.
if you think a person is evil, that doesn't mean they don't have a soul.
well,
Soul is the life force, period.
Thoth has
Yeah.
It
told
is the
us that
memory of your life force.
the Thoth has told us that the majority of humans on the planet right now are losing their soul due to the environmental fractionation.
That is
That's
impossible.
Well, interesting. So
If you're running a meat suit, you have a soul.
well,
Yeah.
And that includes animals as well.
but that
Well,
If
then
you
we
don't
talk
have a
about the
soul,
clones,
the
but what about
body
clones then?
dies.
well, yes,
But then we could talk about Matt. Then we could talk about clones and how a lot of SSP members say that the clones are actually they have souls.
Yes,
And that
they
you're-
do.
The clones
we
are
are
born
pushed in on
with
top of them.
souls, just like yes,
But
we
what
are
about multiple-
possessing the clones.
but they.
What about the multiples? What about multiples and alters then? I mean, this is a whole nother subject matter.
And what
You
about
the whole
Alters are what I'm going to be talking about at the Full Disclosure Conference 2025 in Tampa Bay in July.
Well, great.
Buy a ticket.
Just to say, those who take memory through death, that might be a clue as well. But I think that is a conversation for a later day, since we've had so much. But I think this has been really useful, and I'm grateful and I take seriously the power that what Penny and Matt have been through. And us who are sitting here in theory are different than those who have been through the mill. So you have my respect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alex, for arranging this conversation to be continued. Blessings. Thank you, Penny.
I say thank you, Matt. Thank you, Brett. Penny.
It was an honor. Penny, you're a hero. Thank you.